that, and that's called the estate of a person. From the estate of a person, exactly 1/3 of that estate was the right of the deceased person, that he could decide to do what he wants to do with it. That 1/3 is what is discussed in the chapter of wasiyah or will. So when a person is writing a will, basically he's saying, okay, with this 1/3 that I have the right over, what should be done after my death? The other 2/3 is what is called irth or inheritance, where primarily speaking, it is the Sharia that comes and says, we will decide how this is to be distributed. And the verses of the Quran that you just heard, where, for example, Allah says that, let's say, if a person dies and he leaves behind a wife and there are no kids, then she will get 1/4. And if there are kids, then she will get 1/8. And if the lady dies and there is no kids, then the husband gets a half. And if there are kids, then the husband gets a quarter. All these verses are talking about from the 2/3, where the Sharia comes and says who is going to get what and under what circumstances. And over there, for the most part, a person cannot do anything about it. Tilka hudud Allah, as the verse says, those are the limits set by Allah. And so there is not much we can do except explain to people how the distribution process is going to happen. So this makes up the total estate of the person. Now, on the message that went out, there was a mention that there will be also be practical will writing. Because of limits of time, it's not very possible to actually, for example, give everyone paper and pen and go over their wills. So there was a QR code, I believe, that was sent out, which is a helpful link, which is by the World Federation. They have made a site called Shia Wills, and if you scan the QR code, basically you go to the World Federation website, the Shia Wills website, and they have structured it in such a way that all you have to do is you plug in whatever details you have. They'll ask you how many people are in your family, what do you have left behind, what do you want to do. And so that's a simple way that you plug in whatever you want, and you click enter. At the end, it gives you a Word document of a ready-made will, where then you can just sign, for example, and do the necessary remaining. So my suggestion is that if somebody wants to currently write a will right now, either they can open that on their phone and start typing the details as the session goes ahead. That's one option. Now, online, there are some other institutions and organizations that have also done a good job in presenting templates for people who then just have to print the template and they can fill their details. So, for example, the Imam Mahdi Association of Marji'iyah in North America, imam-us.org. That's the main organization that's the representative of Atlas Thani in North America. They have an Islamic will template on their website, which somebody can also use that template as well. And something closer to home is in South Africa, Sayyid Aftab Haider. If you go to the website afosa.org, afosa.org, he has also compiled a nice template over there with some discussions about South African law over there. So somebody can also use that template as the discussion goes on, and they can then fill whatever they would like to fill. So when it comes to a person's estate when they die, like I mentioned, 1/3 is based on the person's will, and 2/3 is what the Sharia says. But before we go into that, as soon as a person dies, there are certain things, certain amounts that will be taken from the estate before even we get to the will and the inheritance. So in the ayah that was recited twice, there was mention of min ba'di wasiyatin yusuna biha aw dayn. Second verse, min ba'di wasiyatin tusuna biha aw dayn, where the ayah is basically saying that all this distribution that Allah is mentioning will happen only after a wasiyah, which you said is the 1/3, aw dayn, or there are some loans or some debts that need to be paid. So the first thing that's going to happen as soon as a person dies is we open up this thing called dayn or debts. So there are some specific debts that the Sharia has mentioned that, okay, as soon as a person dies, first these will be taken out. Then if you're lucky and there is something remaining, then the next step will be the 1/3 of the will. And then comes the 2/3 of the inheritance. But if these debts are so much that nothing remains, then okay, then no one gets anything. So the first thing is things that are removed from the estate as soon as a person dies, regardless of the will or the inheritance of the person. So the ayah particularly says dayn or a debt. Now if you go to the riwayat and the fatwa, they open up this debt and they say, okay, debts are of two types. There are some specific debts related to humans, and there are some debts related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what are these debts that will be first removed from the person's estate? Number one, a person's normal funeral expenses, including kafan. So a person dies, there are normal expenses that are there: kafan, ghusl, burial. These burial costs, primarily speaking, okay, if nobody else comes forward, like Jamaat doesn't come forward and says, we are not giving kafan, primarily speaking, it will be taken away from the estate of that person. The cost of burying him, if there is a cost, for example, over here, you don't have to pay for land. But say, for example, you are in a place where, no, okay, there is no like a waqf land for burial, you have to pay for it. In that case, that would also be taken from the person's estate if he had not yet paid from before. So the burial costs, primarily speaking, will be taken from the estate, unless somebody else comes forward and says, no, for example, like Jamaat, they wouldn't charge you, for example, for like giving you a kafan. Let's say you didn't have your own kafan, Jamaat is probably not going to charge you. So in that case, this wouldn't apply. But primarily speaking, if nobody else comes forward, the burial costs, the normal funeral expenses, what is generally considered normal, not something that's extravagant. Whatever is average, those will be first taken out if need be. The second one is the wajib hajj that had not been performed by the person. What we mean by wajib hajj is that there are times in a person's life where hajj becomes wajib upon them. So he becomes mustati. Let's say, for example, if let's say hajj costs hypothetically $10,000, and let's say there was a time in this person's life after he became baligh that he hit that mark and he had, for example, $10,000, all the conditions applied, and he didn't go for hajj for whatever reason. Now we'll say that, okay, hajj was wajib upon him. He was a mustati, for whatever reason he didn't go. Now, if he didn't go throughout his life, as soon as he dies, okay, that hajj, because it had become wajib upon him when he was alive, so that now money will also be taken out from his estate, and somebody will go and perform hajj on his behalf. Again, the assumption is that in his life, at one point he was mustati, but he did not go. And so, when we say it's taken out of the estate, it doesn't mean that, okay, he has to have cash. Say, for example, he didn't have cash. He had, for example, items. He had, for example, property. Okay, that will be liquefied, and then, for example, somebody will be sent to perform hajj on his behalf. So that's the second debt that is taken out from the estate before even reaching the will, which is the wajib hajj that had not been performed. Number three is his debts to other people in society. Say, for example, he had taken a loan. Okay, somebody, let's say, for example, took Africa Federation student loan, and for whatever reason, they didn't pay. Either they didn't have, or they were just being negligent. Okay, now as soon as they die, we put the will to one side. So, okay, first of all, this loan must be paid from the estate. Any loans that he has to be paid from his estate. The price of items bought on credit. Say, for example, a businessman, okay, he had his business running, and usually what happens is they buy on credit. So he bought some, I don't know, some stock or some goods, let's say from Dubai, on credit, and he said, yes, after 30 days, I'll pay you. And he passed away. Okay, that will also be taken out from his estate, and they will be paid whatever the due was. Or, for example, if somebody had already paid him in advance for something that he owed them. So he was a business, somebody paid him in advance, and he was to deliver the goods, and he died. Okay, those goods are also taken, because that's also part of his estate. That would also be given to that person. Wages due under a lease contract. So he has workers who are working under him, and okay, he has to pay their wages, and he died, and he's not yet paid their wages. So whatever amount of time that they have worked for him, and he has not yet paid them, okay, that will also be taken from the estate. So, for example, at home, let's say you have maids. It's not the case that the maid is entitled to her salary at the end of the month. Okay, say for example, this person died in the middle of the month. So this maid, for example, has worked for 15 days since the start of the month. She's not yet received her wages. So 15 days worth of wages will be taken from the estate and given to the maid. That, okay, this is also a kind of debt that this person owed. The wife's mahar. Say the husband, for example, in his lifetime didn't pay the mahar. And the wife had also not forgiven the husband for the mahar. So even that, from the estate, okay, the wife will be told, okay, how much is the mahar? Here, you take the mahar. Unless, of course, she forgives. Unpaid nafaqah. Say the wajib of the husband is that he has to pay for her upkeep throughout the month. For whatever reason, he was negligent. They were fighting, for example. She was sent to her, for example, father's house. Doesn't matter. As long as they were married, the nafaqah was wajib upon him. And the nafaqah of the wife is considered a debt. So even if, let's say, he was poor, okay, it's not like he was intentionally not paying. No, he was poor, he couldn't afford. Doesn't matter. Okay, now this is a debt on his shoulder. How many months you didn't pay nafaqah? Okay, the wife now is entitled, before touching the will, before touching inheritance, that nafaqah will also be removed and given to her. And then diyat and blood money liabilities. So in the Sharia, anytime you physically harm someone and you cause them injury, you have to pay them diyat. So for example, okay, you are, let's say, I don't know, a school teacher, madrasa teacher, and I don't know, you hit a child, for example, even if it's by mistake. Okay, and let's say minimum, the skin turned red. So now you have to pay that child diyat. Okay, if he forgives or if he's baligh and he forgives, then that's fine. But primarily speaking, okay, you still owe him diyat. So even all those diyat that somebody had hurt someone, bodily harm, that also will be taken out from the estate and given to them. Then number 4 comes religious dues. So these were debts that you have to people that will be taken from the estate. Number 4 is religious dues such as khums. For example, he has unpaid khums. Okay, that will also be taken from the estate. In fact, if this specifically applies to if the person was somebody who, when he was alive, he would regularly pay khums. But usually what happens is you pay khums once a year. So say for example, his khums date was 1st of January. So he paid his khums. And then in the middle of the year, okay, he passed away. Let's say for example, he passed away 1st of April. Okay, so from 1st of January to 1st of April, any new income that he had gained over here is liable for khums. So that khums will also be taken and the khums will be paid. Any zakat that was liable upon him, even zakatul fitra, for example, let's say he died, for example, right immediately after Eid and he had not yet paid zakatul fitra, that will also be taken. And lastly, mazalim. Mazalim means there are times when people oppress others, even if it's unintentionally, and they owe other people money, for example. And let's say now they cannot get in touch with that person. So for example, I was driving and I knocked someone's car. Okay, it was my fault, I knocked the car, I have to pay him for the damage I've caused to his property. And okay, I don't know where he went, okay, I'm not in touch with him, I can't find that person now. Doesn't matter, you still have to pay that as Raddul Mazalim. This is a case of Majhulul Malik, where yes, I know I owe someone, but either I don't know that person or that person cannot be reached. Say for example, okay, I don't know, I took a loan from someone and it's been many years and that person, there's no contact from him. Okay, I still owe that money, which will be called as Raddul Mazalim. What I owe people and now I can't reach them. So all of these are things that will be taken out from the main estate before even coming to the will. Now you can imagine many of these things are very personal. Your family is not going to know about it. So that's why the first thing to do in your will is to mention that before distributing my estate or before doing anything, first here are where I stand with these items. So for example, you know better, okay, I have not paid, for example, this person, I owe him this much. You have to put all those details in the will, because otherwise the family is not going to know who to give. You come to the mayyat and you say, for example, yes, if anyone had a debt, please come and collect. Okay, there are many people who don't come for the mayyat, they won't know. So it's the person's duty himself that, okay, in your will you first write and say, yes, when I die, okay, these are the current debts that I have, these are the religious dues I have not paid, so that the family can actually take that amount from the estate. Because if they don't know, they cannot take that amount from the estate. So the first point in the will is that, okay, these items that must be taken, mention it in your will and say, before distributing the 1/3, these items that I have, you can please take care of them. So if you look at, for example, the templates that I've mentioned, the templates, they mention this. They mention that, okay, do you have, for example, wajib hajj that's on you, if not gone? Do you have, for example, any debts? Okay, write all of them over there. So like I said, so these things are taken before even getting to the 1/3 of his estate. If a person wants, he can now even change these things and put them under his 1/3 and say, okay, from the 1/3 of my estate, pay for these things. The result will be, though, that his 1/3 is going to get less in terms of what else he can do with it. The whole idea was that these things were to be removed minus the 1/3. It was completely separate. But if he put in his will and say, no, from my 1/3, for example, send someone for my wajib hajj. Okay, fine. You use that option, and now the amount that's left for your 1/3 is going to reduce. So primarily speaking, if you're writing a will right now, don't say, okay, pay for my 1/3. No, say, okay, these are the current debts that I have. After paying this, now we'll come to my 1/3. So okay, these have been removed from the original estate, and now comes the actual part of where your will takes place, or where you have authority to do with your money the 1/3 that I mentioned. So first of all, this will that we write, is it something wajib? No, the answer is, primarily speaking, writing a will is not wajib. It is highly recommended. There are certain narrations say, for example, a mu'min should have his will under his pillow every night. So it is extremely recommended, but primarily speaking, it's not wajib per se. There are only certain times when it becomes wajib to write a will. And that is when a person sees the signs of death coming to him. So for example, he has some terminal illness and he says, okay, yes, now death is getting close to me. And he has any of the following, which then it becomes wajib for him to write about these stuff that I'll mention. And for those who are not wajib as well, it's recommended obviously that these things, write them in your will. Just that obviously if you don't write it, it's not that you've done haram. But wajib is such that, okay, if I see death, I have to write this will. If I'm not seeing death, highly recommended, especially if it's going to lead to fights after your death. So what are the things that are wajib for a person to write? Number one, his amanat or trust that people have given to him. Write it down that, okay, whose property do I have that I have to give back to them? Whose things have I loaned or borrowed from people? I have things in my possession that I have borrowed from someone. Write it down and say, okay, I borrowed, for example, this book from this person. I borrowed this laptop from the Jamaat, for example. Write everything that you have loaned so that these things can now be returned. Interestingly, even investments or capital for partnership. So for example, okay, I was in partnership with someone and now I have part of their wealth with me. Okay, mention that. The second one is money he owes others. So here it becomes wajib. If he sees death is approaching and he says, okay, I owe people money, then first of all, if the time has come to pay back, so you pay back immediately. But no, if the time has not yet come back, or I don't have the money, or for whatever reason, then put it in the will that, okay, these are the people I owe them money. Similarly, for example, what we mentioned before about the religious dues, if he sees death approaching, okay, it's wajib for him to write that, okay, I see, for example, death approaching, so these are my dues that I have. Now, the other thing that's there is that it is wajib for a person to write in their will about all the wealth that the heirs don't know about. So if, for example, I've only told my wife about my, I don't know, Nairobi bank account, it's wajib to say that in my will that, for example, yes, I have another bank account in London, I have another bank account in Dubai. The reason is because if I don't mention this stuff, technically their wealth is also part of their inheritance. So how are they going to get their wealth? So by me not writing about all my wealth that I have with me that people don't know about, the inheritors don't know about, this act of me not writing is going to lead them to not get their share. So in order for them to get their share after I die, it's wajib for me to write everything that I have, in the sense of whichever accounts I have, anything that's hidden, for example, that they don't know about, everything with details should be written. Now the will itself from a fiqhi perspective can be both oral or written. Now legally, okay, orally probably will be a problematic issue, but from a Shari perspective, it's not wajib for me to write down the will. I can orally also, for example, let's say call someone and tell them, okay, after my death do X, Y, Z, for example. Shari, yes, that's fine. But the thing is that this will then lead to many cases of where this will lead to disputes after your death. Where somebody comes and says, yes, for example, the marhum told me that I have to take this much money and give it to that person. And the inheritors will be like, okay, he didn't tell us that. And when it becomes big amounts, this is what leads to fights. So even though technically, Shar'an, it's okay to have an oral will, but it's highly recommended that, okay, no, make it written such that you stop disputes later on. The person who is writing the will, the testator, is called a musi. Musi means the person writing the will or the person who's going to die and whose wealth is going to be distributed. So for the musi or the testator, one condition that's slightly relevant is that, okay, he has to be baligh. So if he is baligh is when he can write his will and say, okay, do this with my money, for example. With regards to a non-baligh child, here there is some restriction about how much can they actually write in their will. Now first of all, you might think, why would a non-baligh child write a will? Well, first of all, non-baligh children also own things. They own, for example, the clothes that they wear, that Eid money that they get, the birthday money that they get, the toys, for example, if they own it. Okay, that's all part of their estate. Estate doesn't mean he has to have millions. He could be having just, for example, one toy car. Doesn't matter. If he dies in the state of non-balighness, that's still part of his estate. So if a non-baligh child wants to write his will, then he can only make a will for his blood relatives. So out of the 1/3 that he has, he can only make a will and say, for example, give to my cousin, my dad. He can't say, for example, give to my friend. Okay, one, he can only give to his blood relatives. And two, he can also give for charitable purposes. So from his 1/3, he can say, yes, sell my toy car and give it, for example, donation to some charitable organization. So that's very briefly for the non-Baligh child. So for the Baligh people, you said, okay, now you have 1/3 that is in your possession, and this is where you have full authority to do practically whatever you want with it. Who do you want to give, who you don't want to give, for example. Here, the Sharia has left it to you. You can decide what needs to be done with this 1/3. And later on, we'll mention some things that the Sharia said is mustahab for you to put in your 1/3. But primarily speaking, the general ruling is that it's up to you. You can do whatever you want. You can give whoever you want. Now, when a person writes a will, it is appropriate for him to choose somebody to be his executor or his wasi. So wasi means the person who will execute his will, who will take the will and say, yes, okay, I take this money from here, put it here, give this property to this person. The person executing the will is called an executor or a wasi. The conditions for an executor or a wasi is that he must be sane, he must be baligh, Muslim, and a trustworthy person. Obviously, you don't want to leave your assets in the hands of somebody who is not trustworthy, and then, for example, he doesn't go by your will. So find somebody who is trustworthy. Shari-wise, okay, there is no limitation on who can be a wasi. It can be a beneficiary from the will, it can be a relative, it can be a complete stranger. In fact, Fuad Lastani says it can even be an organization. So you can even make Saj as your wasi and say, yes, Saj, for example, will be the executors, and they will, for example, distribute my will as I have said. Legally, okay, it might be something else, but from Shari perspective, you can put anyone and everyone. It doesn't matter if they are receiving, not receiving, it's okay, as long as they are sane, baligh, Muslim, and trustworthy. Now, somebody says, okay, somebody put, let's say, my name in their will and says, yes, I want Habib to be my executor. The problem is that if I find out after that person's death, then it's wajib upon me to take up that responsibility. I cannot say, hey, I didn't sign up for this. If I found out after his death and this person didn't tell me when he was alive, and now they open the will and they say he's put my name as the executor, then it is wajib upon me to go and take care of those responsibilities and carry out the will the way he has mentioned it. Unless it becomes such that it is extremely difficult for the person, which is known as haraj. So if it's extremely difficult for me to carry out this responsibility, then okay, fine, I can say, okay, I'm not going to do this. But in normal circumstances, even if there's difficulty, I have to run to the bank, I have to run to the real estate, court, everything doesn't matter. I have to, it's wajib upon me to accept that and do it. But if it happens during the lifetime, that the person, for example, informs me and say, look, I'm putting you as my executor. In his lifetime, if he tells me there, I can tell him, hey, sorry, I'm not taking this responsibility. Okay, it's going to be all fights with your relatives and all. I don't want to take this responsibility. In his lifetime, I can refuse. Then that's fine. Then he can now, he has to find somebody else. But if he didn't tell me, he died, and then I'm seeing my name, okay, now my hands are tied and I must carry out this responsibility. Similarly, it is allowed to appoint multiple wasis or multiple executors. So I can, instead of putting just one person, I can put 2 or 3 people, for example, and I can say that, for example, either they can work independently, or I can say, for example, no, they must work together. So if I say they must work, they can work independently, and say, for example, in the 1/3, I say, yes, for example, use, I don't know, 10,000 shillings and to donate to, for example, any orphan. Okay, so because now they can work independently, any one of them can come and pick the 10,000 and go give any orphan. But if I say no, they have to be together. Now one of them cannot say, yes, I want to give this orphan, and the other one says, no, let's give this orphan. No, they have to come together, work together, and they must all agree to work together on that will, and they must all be in acceptance of that. So if a person wants, he can appoint multiple wasis or executors. And he can also say that, for example, if this executor dies before me, then who is number 2, for example? Or, for example, I'm only appointing this executor so long as, for example, he lives in Nairobi, for example. If he migrates, then I'm putting this other person. So here, okay, the Sharia says, okay, you can decide how you want to appoint the wasi. Now the wasi himself is the person who's going to implement the will. He can appoint people on his behalf to do those tasks. He can't say, yes, you guys go and do completely, I'm stepping back. No, that's not allowed. But he can appoint representatives. So for example, he says, okay, yeah, take this will. He sends someone, says, you take this will, go to the bank, for example, and let's say withdraw the money. So he can appoint someone on his behalf to go and, for example, do the administrative work, but he cannot completely step back and say, I am not taking up this responsibility. Interestingly, the wasi, meaning the executor, can also take a remuneration for this job. So sometimes, for example, it's a very easy job. That okay, yes, there's only, for example, there's only some cash at home. You only have to divide. It's no big deal. But sometimes it becomes very difficult. Running to government offices and banks and property and all, it's tedious tasks. So the wasi can take a remuneration for this job of his. It's not a must that he does fi sabilillah and does it for free. No, he can take an average price, which is in fiqh is called ujratul mithl, meaning the market price. That okay, what is the average somebody would take for doing this kind of job? For example, running around offices, paperwork, what's the normal amount that you take? That amount he can take for himself. Unless the will explicitly says that no, this person must do the work for free. If it's not stated, then he can take a remuneration for his work that he's doing. Secondly, the person who's writing the will, after he has appointed a wasi to apply his will, he can also appoint a supervisor, which again, if you see the templates that I mentioned, that's also there. He can say, okay, I want to appoint such and such person as the supervisor who will now look over that the wasi or the executor is doing his job properly. So that's also there. Say for example, somebody is fearing that, okay, I know this person is trustworthy, but if he goes to implement my will, what if, for example, he'll cut corners or he'll take something? So now I can now appoint a supervisor and say the supervisor's job is to make sure that the wasi and the executor does his job properly. So that also is there. You can put in the templates there if you want to appoint somebody like that. Again, it's not wajib, but if you want, you can do that. Another person that can be appointed is a guardian over his children. If somebody has non-baligh children, he can appoint who is going to be the guardian after he dies. Now this is specifically for men, because shar'an, the guardian of the child is the father and the grandfather. And if none of them are there, then it goes to the hakim al-shar. So the mujtahid then has to appoint someone. So if the father, for example, is saying, okay, I'm going to die, rather than, for example, go this long route and they go find somebody from the hakim al-shar, the father can, in his will, say, I'm appointing so-and-so person, let's say the mother, I'm appointing the mother as the guardian over the children. She's going to look after them, their fees, education, taking care of them. Everything will be on her part. So those are the specific names that you will see in these templates where people you have to appoint. Now coming to the will itself, in fiqh terms, there are two types of wills that are mentioned. One is called wasiyat tamliki and one is called wasiyat ahdi. So I'll start with the second one. Wasiyat ahdi, or a directive will, is where a person in his will gives an ahad, gives a direction to someone to say, do these kind of things. Do this act, do that act, for example. Such as, for example, bury me in so-and-so place. Or, for example, make sure so-and-so person, for example, gives me ghusl. Here is where I'm commanding them to actually do things. I'm not telling them who is the owner of this and that. I'm giving them actions to do. Do this, do that, for example. Or on my behalf, for example, do this, like gift this, donate this, for example. So I'm not gifting right now. I'm telling you, this person, you make sure you gift these items. Which is, there's not so much discussion over here, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. Here is where, for example, the most practical thing is with regards to your burial, for example, if somebody has specific wishes. Yes, I don't know, bury me, for example, next to, I don't know, my grandfather. Or, for example, bury me in, I don't know, Kathmandu, wherever. Okay, those are things where the person himself can decide and say, okay, do this, do that. The second one, which is the bulk of the discussion, is called wasiyat tamliki, or transferee will, where here you are transferring ownership of items. Where, for example, in the will you say, okay, this car of mine, for example, goes to this person, this house goes to this person, this much goes to that person. Here I'm transferring ownership of these items. In this case, the person who is receiving okay, it's not wajib for him to accept. It depends on that person's acceptance. After the will, for example, they can come to him and they say, the wasi comes to him and say, yes, look, in the will, the deceased said, for example, this car belongs to you. So here, he has an option. Either he accepts it or he rejects it. So he has that option to accept or reject. With regards to specific properties, say, for example, I have 1/3 of my estate, and the value of the 1/3, for example, is, let's say, hypothetically, for example, I don't know, $20,000. So I have a car, for example, that's valued at $5,000. So I can make a will, for example, for my car and say, for example, yes, give my car to XYZ friend of mine, for example. This, I'm giving him ownership of the car. Now the question is, can the heirs come and use the car before it has been given ownership or not? Here, if the will specifically states a specific item, then the heirs cannot dispose of that property. So if I say specifically take my car, for example, my Harrier, for example, of this number plate and give it to that person, the heirs cannot touch that. That is now ghasbi. As soon as I die, they cannot use it at all. But if I don't say a specific item, I mention a proportion or a fractional share or a percentage. So for example, I say, yes, after my death, from my 1/3, give, I don't know, 20% to so and so. Now here, yes, the heirs can now still use those items as long as it's not going to harm the person who is going to receive it. If a person makes a bequest for several people, so he says, for example, okay, from my 1/3, give, for example, this car to, let's say I have 3 uncles, I'm making this, all 3 uncles can now own this car. I'm giving them to all 3. It's not wajib for me to give it to one person only. In that case, they all equally then become owners of that car. So like I mentioned that, okay, you only have authority over 1/3 of your estate, what you can do. What happens if somebody writes in his will and all the things that he has written now goes beyond the 1/3? This is now where many people would love to do this for practical reasons, and there are certain ways that actually this is going to play out. If the total bequests exceed 1/3 of the estate, the validity of the will with regards to the remainder that's above the 1/3 is dependent on the rest of the heirs giving permission. So for example, my total estate when I die, for example, is $90,000. Okay, so that means I have only up to $30,000 that I can use. Whether it's cash, whether it's property, doesn't matter. So I had a house, for example, of $50,000, let's say the value of the house. And I say, I want this house, for example, to go to so-and-so person, my relative, my wife, my daughter, doesn't matter. Okay, now you've gone above $30,000 by $20,000. If the house was $30,000, it's fine, you could have done whatever you wanted with it. But now, above $30,000, you are now entering into the realm of the inheritance. So the other heirs, now, it depends on them giving permission. If they say, yes, okay, we agree, it's fine, let the house go. If they give permission, then the house goes to the person that I have bequeathed it to. If they don't give permission, okay, then now it's going to be a problem that I can't give the whole house to that person. And so now we would have to come to a compromise to say, okay, how can I give now 30,000 value of the house to that person? Here is where some interesting points come, which I feel are very practical. Firstly, this permission that the rest of the heirs give, it's not enough that they are inwardly satisfied. No, it has to be verbally or practically. They have to say that, yes, okay, we are giving permission. Just saying it in your heart is not enough. Now, most importantly, this ruling that I'm going to mention right now, I feel, in my humble opinion, this can solve most of the issues which we have fighting about inheritance later on, if you understand this point. I said that you're allowed 1/3. If you do more than 1/3, then they have to give permission. The ruling is they can also give permission whilst you are still alive. So it's not the case that you have to die and then they give permission and say, okay, yes, now the extra that was our right, it's fine, you can give to that person. No, this can be done even when you are alive. So what this means is that the gravity of this situation is such that I can today, for example, gather all my heirs. I'll tell them, look, currently where I stand, my estate is, for example, $90,000. Okay, so that means I'm only allowed 30,000 worth of actions to do. But I have this house of 50,000, and let's say, for example, I want to give to your mother after me If after that they give permission, fine. But right now I can tell them, look, 20,000 is above the limit that I have. If you give permission, then we are sorted right now, here and now. So if they give permission now, they say, yes, fine, we don't want it, it's okay. Even that 20,000 you can give, the whole house belongs to her. If they agree, then, okay, the house is now fully going to belong to her after I die. So this permission that the rest of the heirs are given can be given when the person is alive. Now, let me even make it more severe. This basically means that I can override the whole Sharia's 2/3 portion and do it the way I want, as long as I get the permission from all the people. So for example, in the 2/3 which the Sharia has decided, let's say the wife only gets an eighth, okay, with the presence of children. Now, I don't want her to get only an eighth. I want her, for example, to get the whole house. So what do? While I'm alive, I call all the heirs and I say, look, your mother, for example, is only going to get 1/8 legally. I want to give her the whole thing. If you give permission, that more than the 1/3 that's going to cover up all this, if you give permission right now, okay, then that will is fine. And the result is that this permission cannot be revoked. So tomorrow, the children cannot come and say, yeah, at that time, I don't know, I was joking, or no, I didn't realize how much I was set. No, once you've given permission, finished. Now you have lost your portion. So this is something that really needs to be looked into, that if somebody wants to go down this path, make sure they understand, first of all, that what they stand to potentially lose. When they're giving permission, right now they might be all emotional, say, yes, you know, you worked so much for us, it's okay. But then tomorrow, for example, let's say life could change. Right now, for example, they might be thinking, okay, we have enough money right now, we are set in our own houses, so we don't need, okay, you can give. Tomorrow, let's say they become poor, they can't then turn around and say, hey, no, we want that back. No. Once you're given the permission, this permission is irrevocable. And at the end, I'll mention that Adl Sistani specifically has a section at the end where he's given advice on how to write a will. One of the advices over there is that if you decide to do this, make sure you get that permission in writing. Make sure it's clear, there is no ambiguity, that tomorrow somebody cannot come and say, I was joking, or I was forced. No, if with their free will, without pressure, they give permission, okay, that's it. That permission is irrevocable. And from this person's side as well, you should not emotionally blackmail your children and say, look, you know, I did so much for you now, at least give up your right so that I can give this house. If they say no, they have not done a haram act. This is not a guna to say, no, I'm not giving up my right. No, that is their right, okay? Whether we like it or not, that is their right. If they say no, they have not done something haram. What you can do is that if, for example, they say no, you can make a deal with them and say, for example, I am, for example, giving you something else right now. I am giving you another property, for example, right now, on the condition that after my death, you give away your right. Okay, if they agree with that, that's fine. So either that first scenario was for free, they said, yes, we give up and we accept. Or here, no, they're not willing to accept for free. You give them something and say, in return, okay, you please give this after my death. Or in return, for example, right now you accept my will the way it is. So technically, they can demand that. And they say, yes, I'm not going to do this for free. You give me, for example, this much wealth, then I'll do it. Technically, they can do that. So that's the 1/3 that if you go above that, okay, it depends on the heirs consenting. So what happens if the heirs do not consent under any circumstance? And now, okay, let's say the person has died and we open his will and it's written a whole list of things that, okay, from my 1/3, you must do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all of that is now coming up to more than the 1/3. By the way, this 1/3 is going to be the value of his estate at the time of his death. So not at the time of writing right now. It could be that right now, for example, he has a lot, but then things change, and at the time of death, he has very little. So here, 1/3, you mean at the time of death, how much is the value of his estate? And that's why it's recommended that actually you constantly review your will. Because life keeps happening, things keep changing. Right now, for example, you're going to calculate based on your own understanding of what you have right now, and you put your will, and 10 years down the line, things could be significantly different. Either, inshallah, you've tripled your wealth, or you've gone to like half, for example. So it's better to also constantly review your will to see that if there are any necessary changes that need to be made. So, okay, the person has died, and he has willed things more than the 1/3. Now he has listed a whole thing over here. He's listed 5 things to be done from his 1/3. Okay, this total of these 5 things is above the 1/3. So now, what is going to be done over here? First of all, if there are things that are wajib in those lists, for example, those are given priority over the non-wajib things. say for example, he said, use for example from my 1/3 money to pay for example 10 years of my qada salah. Remember we said qada salah and fast, I didn't mention it at the start to say that that's taken out from the initial estate, because salah, qada salah and som is not a dain, it's not a debt. This is from the 1/3, the person has the right, he says okay, no, for example, I want 10 years of salah to be done. If this is something wajib that he's doing, this will be given priority. As opposed to, for example, some people out of ihtiyat, they say, yes, for example, 10 years salah, 10 years fasting. It's not that I missed 10 years, but just out of ihtiyat. So here we're talking about priority of things that are considered wajib for sure. Let's say he for sure, for example, let's say he missed 6 months of salah. Let's say he was in hospital, for example. He says, okay, I need this to be done. So wajib will be given priority over the non-wajib items. Now, the other thing is that what I mentioned last night, that if a person is in a terminal illness where he is close to death, then for Atla Sistani, this person can only dispose of wealth limited to 1/3. Like I said, Atla Khui says, okay, you're still alive, even though you know, okay, the doctor said 1 month. Atla Khui said, okay, you can do whatever you want with your wealth. You want to give everything away and nothing remains for the people after you, that's up to you. For Atla Sistani says, no, 1/3 only, you have the option for terminal illness that you can do whatever you want. Now in this 1/3 where a person is saying do this, do that, a person may say that, okay, either he can choose a specific asset and say that, for example, when I say take from my 1/3 and do this, I mean specifically take from the cash that is lying in my bank account. Or for example, I specifically mean this has to come out from, for example, my car. So if he has specified the specific asset where those things need to come out from, if he has left it at the determination of the executor, then the executor may designate the 1/3 in a particular asset. So either he says take out from this car, or he can say, for example, I'm leaving it to my executor to decide where this will come out from. He will, for example, decide what's the best option, and then now if he has said yes, the executor will decide, then it doesn't matter whether the rest of the heirs agree or not. So the executor might say that yeah, there is, for example, cash in the bank, but no, I, for example, think it's better that we sell this car and then use that money for the will. Okay, because he specifically said in the will that my executor will decide, so now, okay, the executor, whatever he says goes, even if the heirs don't consent. But in other cases where either himself, he has not said a specific item that is used, for example, from this property, and he has not told that, okay, the executor must decide, then now the heirs must come to an agreement about how to go about performing those acts that he mentioned in the 1/3. Based on the interests of the deceased. So the heirs can come and say that, yes, okay, I think we'll just use the cash that's in the bank, or they may come and say, no, the cash, we'll divide it amongst ourselves, we'll take this 1/3, for example, from the house. We will sell the house, and then from there, the value of 1/3 will come from there. Okay, they have to come to an agreement in that case. And so obviously you can see that that's has potential of leading to disagreements. So it's better, in your will, you write, okay, this 1/3 that you're saying, where is it coming out from? Is it, for example, the cash in your bank? Is it you want them to sell your car? Is it you want the executor to decide? Because if you don't do that, then obviously there's high chances that there are going to be disagreements after you. For the executor to implement the will, it is wajib for the executor to not be negligent in delaying the execution of the will. So delaying the application of the will is not allowed. He has to do it as soon as possible. Which is why it's very important that the will is written in such a way that you don't cause issues later on where people are stuck in courts for years. Because the duty of the executor is, as soon as possible, implement the will. So now the executor says, okay, I have to implement this will as soon as possible. There is no liquid cash, so now I have to sell assets. Do I have to sell it immediately? Yes. Because you have to implement the will, then okay, as soon as, for example, you've buried the person, okay, now get to work and start selling the assets, whether it's property, whether it's car, whatever it is, sell it immediately. Somebody says, yeah, but the market is not good right now. If I go and sell the property, it's going to harm them. So here, if, because of the market problems, if it's going to leave a massive difference where, let's say in normal circumstances, he was to sell at, for example, I don't know, 1 million, and right now, for example, if he goes and sells, he's going to sell at, for example, 600,000. He says, okay, this is a huge difference. In that case, and he says that this difference is such that ordinary rational people will not go and sell right now. If it's that much of a difference, then he is allowed to wait until the market settles, and then he can sell at the normal price. Interestingly, the person who's writing the will can say that because he has authority of the 1/3, he can say that, okay, from the 1/3, I don't want you to sell specific properties of mine. I want you to know instead, put it on rent and use that rent, for example, for XYZ charitable purposes. So for example, he can say, yes, the value of the car is amongst the 1/3. So I am saying in my will, do not sell my car, either, for example, rent it out to someone, and the money that you get, use it for XYZ charitable purposes, or give it to someone. That also can be done. Now, some people have a question that, okay, what about, for example, this idea that people have where husband says to wife that, okay, after I die, everything I have is yours. And the wife says, everything I have is yours after I die. Okay, obviously that makes zero sense, it doesn't work, because you only have authority over 1/3. But some people have a genuine problem where they say, okay, let's say, for example, this is, for example, my second wife, okay, I don't have children from her, and so if I die, where is she going to stay? I want to give her some property, but the property is not the 1/3. The property is more than the 1/3. So one way I said is, okay, you gather everyone, you get permission from them, that's fine. Another thing that a person can do is that you are allowed to bequeath the benefit or the usufruct of his property for a certain period of time. So here, I am not willing about a specific item. I'm not saying this ownership goes to this person. No, I am saying a will about the usage or the ijara or the rental, the usufruct of this specific property for a certain period of time. So for example, he says, I want the rent of my shop for 2 years to go to so-and-so person. Or I own this house, so I want my wife to live in this house for X amount of years. Now usually people say until she dies. I'll come to that. Start with a specific amount to see how the calculation works. So let's go with the idea that, okay, the person says, I want my wife to live in my house for 10 years. Now to see whether such a bequest falls within the 1/3 or not, this is what we do. First of all, we see that, okay, at the time that the person has died, we will value all his assets after deducting from the principal estate, what we mentioned at the start. After that, we say, okay, his total estate, how much is the value right now? And then we also value the property that he's talking about, where he says, for example, okay, my wife to stay in this house for 10 years. So he goes and, let's say, for example, he goes and the person, let's say the executor says, okay, let's value all the estate right now. And he says, minus this house, everything else comes to, for example, 30 million. And then you say, okay, what about this house? So this is what the person does. He goes to like the real estate agent and he says that, okay, if this house was to be sold right now immediately, okay, what is the value of the house as it stands right now? So for example, let's say he says, okay, the house right now is 60 million, for example. So 30 million, the rest of the assets, 60 million is the house that this person has. Then now he'll ask the estate agent and say, okay, tell me, if I was to sell this house right now, but I will tell the seller that you will only receive ownership after X amount of years, whatever the amount of years that he had stated in his will. So for example, he said, my wife to stay in this house for 10 years. So he tells the real estate agent, yeah, if I sell right now, you're telling me 60 million, for example. But if I was to sell it to someone and tell them that, look, I'm selling it to you right now, but you can only move in after 10 years. So obviously, the value of that house will go down. That's why, for example, if you buy a house right now that's being constructed, the value is less because you can't move in right now. So hypothetically, you ask the estate agent that if I was to sell right now to a person in a way that I tell him that, look, for 10 years, you can't touch the house. The house belongs to you, but you can't move in. Okay, somebody's staying there for 10 years. After 10 years, you can move in. Now, what's the price? So, for example, let's say the person says, okay, this is now from 60 million, you're selling it at 30 million. If you sell at 30 million, this is the value right now, meaning a house minus usage for 10 years. So, to put you back in the picture, the rest of the estate was 30 million. This house, current actual value is 60 million. And if he was to sell minus, for example, 10 years not being able to move in, it also comes to, let's say, 30 million. So in this case, what happens is that the total assets of the deceased person is 30 and 60, that's 90 million, that was the total that he had. And this bequest that he had for his wife to stay in the house for 10 years is costing him 30 million. The difference between the actual value of the house, which you said if you sell right now, is 60 million. If you tell them that, hey, I'm selling you right now, but you move in 10 years later, it's okay, now it's 30 million. So 30 million is what you are actually bequeathing to your wife right now. When you say stay for 10 years, that's equivalent to 30 million in terms of the value of the house. So 30 million is the value of this 10 years staying, and the total value of the assets was 90 million. So this is in the 1/3. So okay, fine. Over here, this will go, and we'll tell the wife that, okay, you're allowed to stay in this house for 10 years because it's part of the 1/3. Now, you can change the numbers. If, for example, the person says, until her death, okay, we'll see, like, until her death means what? How many years does that apply to? We don't know when she's going to die. But using this calculation, we can say that, look, maximum 1/3 is going to come to, for example, 20 years, okay? So that means that he can put in his will, and he says until she dies, she has to stay in this house. But what that means is that the value of 1/3 is only equal to 20 years. So 20 years she can stay in this house, and that is technically still okay for him. So she's not the owner of the house itself, but nobody can kick her out for 20 years. Now usually, if the husband is dying, for example, let's say like, for example, 60, 70, he knows that, okay, most likely, let's say the wife is not going to last for like 20 years. So in that case, it's still part of his 1/3, and so this will also be a valid will. And if he says, for example, 20 years, but the value from the 1/3 is only coming to like 10 years, for example, okay, she can stay for 10 years, after which now, depends on the heirs giving permission. Now, coming to the last parts over here that I wanted to mention is that this idea that people have that, okay, I don't want somebody to inherit from me. I have, for example, disowned my son. I have disowned my daughter. In terms of the 2/3, whatever is there, they are going to get. A person cannot block someone from reaching that inheritance in the 2/3. So even if you are not on talking terms with your child has left the house, he's gone somewhere else, doesn't matter. You've not talked for years, still from that 2/3 of the inheritance, that person will get whatever right there is of theirs. Now it's up to you. In the 1/3, you don't want to give them, that's fine. That is in your hands. You can say, okay, I'm not going to give them anything. So there are other points to consider in using your 1/3. One is that there are some people that we would like to give or we would hope that they would inherit from the 2/3, but the Sharia says these people are not going to inherit. And this is where actually they have, I know like practical cases of this. So for example, the Sharia says an illegitimate child is not going to inherit from the 2/3. So, okay, if somebody has an illegitimate child, then in the 1/3 he can put, it's okay, in the 2/3 he's not going to get anything. So in the 1/3 he can say, okay, give this child this much. Now, you might be like, okay, is that even relevant to us? Yes, actually, we have cases in our communities where the criteria for whether a child is legitimate or illegitimate is not whether the couple was married at the time of delivery. No, at the time of conception, if they were married or not married, that is going to decide whether the child is legally, is he considered a son of adultery or not. So if at the time of conception, they are not married, so they committed adultery, then she became pregnant and said, okay, now let's get married, because people are going to be like, okay, what's happening? So let's get married. So the delivery happened after they were married, fine. But this child is considered an illegitimate child. So somebody has an illegitimate child, okay, he can put in his 1/3 and say, okay, give him from the 1/3. Or for example, in the 2/3, a child who is not a Muslim doesn't stand to inherit. So for example, somebody has a son, for example, who's grown up and now he's become an atheist. This also happens in our communities. Okay, he becomes an atheist. Now even if he returns back to become a Muslim, he doesn't inherit anything. So from the 2/3, he's not going to get anything. If the father wants, from the 1/3, he can say, yes, my atheist son, we can put for him something over here. Or the father knows that, okay, there are some heirs who are going to get less from the 2/3. So I said the 2/3 that the Sharia has stated who is going to get what. And there is no time or need to go through the exact percentages that the Sharia has mentioned for each of the different scenarios. If somebody is interested, this Shia wills actually, from what I saw last time, it has that option that you put how many children, wives, parents, who is alive. It'll tell you who gets what. That's one option. Two, Sheikh Tahir Rida Jafar has made a calculator called Irth calculator. So if you go to his website, although the website is not working right now because it's based in Iran, but when the internet opens, you can check that website. There's a calculator over there where you basically plug in who are your relatives, how many people are alive, how many children, wives, everything. You click enter and tell you from the 2/3 who is going to get what. So we're not discussing those percentages right now. But safe to say that some people are going to get less. Primarily speaking, the wife usually gets the least amount when children exist. So if the couple has children, the wife is only going to get 1/8. So here as well, from the 1/3, this person can compensate. And he says, okay, my wife is going to get less over there, so let me compensate over here so that she has something. Or for example, let's say the father feels that, for example, I don't know, I have, let's say, 2 children. One of them is married in a well-off family. One of them is not married in such a well-off family. So now, after death, let's say if they're both sons, okay, they're going to get equal, for example. But this one needs more. So, okay, you can recompense from the 1/3. So these are practical things that a person can do. In terms of something that's explicitly stated to be mustahab to be mentioned in your 1/3, surprisingly, is what we call the karimani. The karimani, which is to feed people after your death who have, for example, let's say attended the funeral, it is mustahab for the person to mention in his 1/3 that, okay, from my wealth, take some money, for example, this much money, and feed the people who come for my funeral. So the kari money that we have actually is mustahab, that the person put in his will that, yes, I am paying for it myself, and so after I die, okay, you can put whatever you want. Say, for example, you can even put the menu. Say, I want prawns biryani, okay, and then whatever the amount is, okay, that amount, if you have that much in your 1/3, then it will be taken. So this is mustahab, specifically that a person says that after my death, those who come for my funeral, you feed them. It's mustahab for a person to write. In conclusion, these 2/3 that I mentioned about the way that the Sharia has designated the percentages, I said we're not going to get into the percentages. You can look at that. But there's one thing that I do want to mention, and that is something that is very unique to Shia fiqh. And that is that the wife does not inherit from the land or anything that is above the land. She only inherits from the value of what is above the land. So, for example, somebody has properties, okay, either, let's say it's like farmland, for example, okay, from that 2/3 that the Sharia decides, okay, the wife, when she says she only get 1/8, if it's just land, she's not going to get anything from that land. If there's a building on the land, even the building, she does not own that building, she's only entitled to 1/8 of the value of that building. And so this is something to bear in mind, that from the 2/3 that the Sharia decides, the wife does not inherit from the land or buildings above the land. She can only inherit the value of what is above the land. But in the 1/3, the person has that power, and say, for example, if he has, let's say, many properties, he says, okay, yes, in my 1/3, I'm saying give this land to my wife. Yes, in the 1/3, where it's in his will, yes, that he can give her land, he can give her property, he can give her buildings above the land, and anything else that he wants. So this is something important to mention. Now, lastly, before I open up for questions, if I can just read you the advice given by Ayatollah Sistani with regards to people who are writing their will. So this is there in Tawzi al-Masail Jami', ruling number 1152. He says, when writing a will, it is recommended to pay attention to certain points. Number one, the testator should specify an executor, a wasi, and a supervisor, a nazir, for the will, and he should inform them of this. Remember I said that, okay, it's not wajib to inform. If after the person dies, somebody says, yes, your name is there, you are in charge, okay, now my hands are stuck, I have to be the executor. So here the recommendation is that, no, it's better you inform them that who you are putting as the executor, and if you are putting a supervisor, who is going to be the supervisor. As far as possible, the full text of the will should be read and explained to them. So this idea that, okay, I'll write a will secretly, don't tell anyone, and then when I die, they open and say, oh, this is what's happening over here. No, Ayat al-Sani says, recommendation is better that, look, you call them, sit them down, and tell them, look, you are the executor, this is what you are going to be expected to do. So that after death, no ambiguity remains in carrying it out. And if he makes any changes to his bequests, he should also inform them. Again, these are all recommendations because it's not wajib. But you can imagine if somebody doesn't do this, it leads to a lot of fights and arguments. Number 2, the testator should include the date of the will in the document, so that if he has written multiple wills during his lifetime and they differ from one another, the final will can be identified. Likewise, he should put his oral bequests in writing so that the grounds for any dispute or disagreement after his death are removed. Again, I said it's not wajib for you to write. We're saying it's better you write, don't just leave it as oral, and put the dates as well. Because you're writing a will right now, okay, inshallah you have a long life, things change and you can decide to change the will. You can say, yes, today for example, okay, we had an amazing session with Shk Habib, let me put his name in the will, let me leave something for him, okay. 2 months later, he decides some list you don't like, you're like, okay, I want to remove his name, he's not getting anything, okay. So make sure that the people who are going to execute your will know these changes that are happening, especially if you are writing multiple documents. It's not the same document that you are editing. If the testator intends to bequeath 1/3 of his estate, then since calculating the exact amount of 1/3 can sometimes be difficult due to the number and variety of assets and the uncertainty of their market value, it is appropriate for him to word the will as follows: spend approximately 1/3 on my behalf, and if somewhat less than that is spent, there is no problem, and I am pleased with that. So here you are giving them flexibility and say, look, you don't have to be 1/3 to the dot. In fact, I should mention over here, it's actually mustahab to will less than the 1/3. So there's several narrations. The one I remember is I think from Imam al-Kadhim, where the Imam says, to will a quarter is better than to will a third. And to will a fifth is even better than to will a quarter. Meaning the less that you put in the will is better, because obviously the remainder then will go under that 2/3 and will be distributed Islamically. So it's not advised to say 1/3 on the dot, I must use everything that I have. No, the less you use in your will, actually the better it is. Number 4, if the testator owes his wife her dowry, or owes a creditor a debt, and the debt was monetary and dates back to earlier times, such that its value has decreased due to the fall in the value of money and purchasing power, and the testator wishes to pay it to that person at the current rate, here this is talking about inflation. This highly relevant in the Iranian circles where inflation is crazy. For us, this doesn't apply so much, except like in the case of mahar, where, for example, okay, you might have said something 30 years ago. Okay, you might have said, for example, yes, I don't know, mahar is 5,000 shillings. Okay, the 5,000 shillings of then and the 5,000 of today is very different. And so, because there is a discussion amongst the fuqaha about, okay, how to deal with this inflation, so in that case, he should bequeath the difference from 1/3 of his estate. So if he feels that, yes, 5,000 at that time, for example, is equivalent to, I don't know, 1,000 of today, then the advice is that, okay, that 4,000, put it in your 1/3. So basically you say, pay her the mahar, that 5,000, and pay her 4,000 extra on top to count for inflation, if you want. Number 5, if the testator does not have any definite debt upon him, but wishes out of precaution to make a will for the payment of khums, zakat, radd al-mazalim, and the like, it is appropriate for him to word the will as follows. This wording is important because, remember we said that when it exceeds the 1/3, the wajib is given priority over the non-wajib. And also when we said that from the principal estate, things are first taken out, we said over there, specifically we mean that things that we know for sure that this person had as a debt. So things that are done out of ihtiyat, he said you should word it like this. The debts mentioned are precautionary and should be paid from 1/3 of my estate. So if somebody is doing something out of ihtiyat, it's better you mention that, look, for example, this salah that I'm saying is out of ihtiyat. It's not like I really have qaza on me, it's out of ihtiyat. And they are, for example, ulama have done this. Recently I heard, I think Ayatollah Ishaq Fayyaz was saying that we were with Ayatollah Khui made his will to us, and he said, after my death, repay all my salah for my whole life and all my fasting for my whole life. Obviously out of ihtiyat. It's not like his whole life he was not praying. So out of ihtiyat he said, my whole life salah, my whole life fasting. Out of ihtiyat, make sure you do it on my behalf. So that comes out of the 1/3. And Atlas Haq Fayaz says that we did it within 1 year of his passing. This is so that no misunderstanding arises that these debts are definite and must therefore be paid from the original estate of the deceased. Number 6, in cases where the will exceeds 1/3 of the estate and the heirs have accepted it, this is what I mentioned, where you can now completely overwrite the Sharia's 2/3 part and you make your own complete new distribution. In cases where the will exceeds 1/3 of the estate and the heirs have accepted it, it is appropriate to obtain from the heirs an acknowledgement and signature confirming their acceptance of the will beyond the 1/3. They should sign it not merely as witnesses to the will, but as those who accept and approve the will beyond 1/3. And they should explicitly state their acceptance so that any grounds for dispute in this regard are removed. Tomorrow they shouldn't come and say, yeah, I gave permission, but I was joking, or I didn't understand, I thought he meant this much, I thought he meant that much. No, everything explicitly write it so that there is no fights later on. Number 7, in cases where the testator uses the word 1/3 in the will, for example, by saying, from 1/3 of my estate, do such and such, but he actually intends to bequeath an amount less than 1/3 and wants the remainder of the 1/3 to be divided among the heirs as inheritance, as God has prescribed, he should state this explicitly. This is basically saying that, say for example, somebody says, from my 1/3, do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we did those 5 things, and there's still some money left based on the 1/3. What do we do with it? Is it that, okay, now this goes to the heirs? No. Shar'an, if he has not explicitly said that, then now this remaining, after everything he has said, is part of his 1/3. The executor will use it in a way that's most beneficial for the person who has died. So he can't just give it to the heirs directly. He must, say for example, give it charity in a way that he knows that the deceased would have liked. That's why this point is saying that make sure you write that, look, after this 1/3, whatever is remaining, what is to be done with it? Shar'an, if there's remaining, okay, it doesn't go to the heirs. It is to be for the deceased, you give in charity. So so that there's no misunderstanding, you can say that yes, if there's anything remaining, give it to the heirs. Number 8, if the testator has a minor child and wants to avoid any suspicion that the coming and going of others in his home or their other usual use of his property after his death would amount to unauthorized disposal of an orphan's property, he may make a will as follows. All ordinary use and disposal carried out by the heirs, relatives and others in my home and property until the completion of the funeral and mourning ceremonies, or for example until my child reaches the age of bulugh and sound judgment, shall be from 1/3 of my estate. This is again referring to that, okay, anytime there is a non-baligh child, okay, there's going to be loads of problems over there. This whole thing I didn't mention about, for example, the heirs giving permission. This only applies if the heirs are baligh. Okay, if there's a non-baligh child, then that non-baligh child cannot come and say, yes, Papa, for example, you can, for example, use more than the 1/3 I'm giving you. No, non-baligh is considered 0. Whatever he says doesn't make a difference. His right is still there. And so it becomes very difficult in these cases when a non-baligh child is part of the heirs. And number 9, if the testator has property in his possession which he had during his lifetime and while in sound health endowed as waqf, gifted to someone and handed over to them, settled with another person through a sulh agreement or transferred into the ownership of others in some other way, it is appropriate for him to state this clearly in the will under a heading such as acknowledgements. This basically saying that, okay, after somebody dies, they come and see, oh, this person, for example, he has this stuff in his house. Now people are confused. Who is the owner over here? If in your lifetime you have gifted it to someone, make sure you say it in the will that, hey, by the way, that car, for example, I already gifted it to my wife, for example. It's not mine. That, for example, the sofa at home doesn't belong to me. The furniture at home belongs to X person. So here, in the acknowledgements, make sure you say that all these things that you're seeing, by the way, they're not mine. I gifted it to somebody else so that there's no misunderstanding. And lastly, there is no problem with the heirs after the death of the deceased mutually agreeing to separate and divide their undivided inheritance shares. So we said that the 2/3 the Sharia has decided. This is saying that the heirs, after the person has died, come and say that, look, we have this 2/3, the Sharia has set a specific amount for each person. The wife is getting, for example, 1/8. The mother, for example, let's say, is getting 1/6. Father is getting 1/6, depending on the scenarios. If they are all baligh, they can all come together and say, you know what, let's cancel all this and you all give up your rights and now let's distribute it in a new way. Either we all distribute equally, or for example, all of it goes to this person. That is something that is there. Because this inheritance that a person receives, it's a right of his. And a right, by definition, is something you can forego. You can say, yes, I'm supposed to receive, for example, half, but okay, it's okay. There are other people involved over here, fine. Let's all forego our rights and let's make a new distribution. Technically speaking, that would be okay as well. And so these are specifically 10 points that Al-Sistani has said that for advice when writing a will that should be taken care of. I think we can open the floor for questions now before namaz, and I guess if there are still more questions, maybe we can push it at night after, let's say, Asif Uncle's presentation. So hiba mashruta, hiba just means hadiya or gift. Hiba mashruta means a conditional gift. So sometimes I gift a person and say, okay, here, happy birthday, this is for you. Sometimes I gift him with a condition. And I say, I am gifting to you this on the condition that you do X, Y, Z for me. And so if he accepts the gift, that means he's also accepting the condition. So in the case that I mentioned, if let's say he doesn't want to accept more than the 1/3, a hiba mashruta over here is, for example, I give him property right now, I'm alive. I say, look, I'm giving you this property as a gift on the condition that after my death, for example, you will give your right to so and so, for example. So hiba mashruta means giving a gift with a condition. And so if the person accepts the gift, he's also accepting the condition. It's wajib for him to follow that condition. If he doesn't follow the condition, it's a guna on him. Yeah. Because this, what you're saying is that you're saying, I'm gifting to you after my death.
No, I'm gifting you now.
Okay.
And then if you die, I get it back.
No, because as soon as she dies, her hands are closed. She can't do anything. Unless that house is, for example, part of the 1/3 of her estate that she has, yes, then that can happen. But like this, no, this would be problematic. Yeah.
So you can't do it twice.
No. Yes. Yes. No, it's nothing. Salah and Som is not a debt. No, it's not a debt. So somebody might say that is zakat and khums, yes, but Salah and Som is not a debt. Somebody might say that yes, but I thought Salah and Som is wajib on the eldest son. So even for the eldest son, the qaza, Salah and Som is only wajib if the father has not dealt with it in his will. If the father in the will, for example, says, yes, I want my Salah and Som to be done, for example, in this manner, then the eldest son doesn't have any responsibility. And in fact, if some people, like, they know their children and they know that, okay, he's not going to pray anything, it's better you put in your will yourself that you know this guy is not going to do anything. Better you put in your will that, okay, I have Salah and Som this much, it needs to be done. Yeah. Yeah. It depends if at that level there's nobody else. So,
if a parent has 4 children,
yeah.
and one dies, the 3 children survive him, then the grandchildren from the first child,
They don't get anything. Yeah. So that's also something to put in the 1/3. Say, for example, I know that yes, I have 4 children, one of them has died and he has grandchildren. Now those grandchildren are orphan. Technically, they are not entitled from the 2/3 to receive anything. So I can, from my 1/3, I can say, okay, I want to bichara, they are orphans. Okay, from the 1/3 I can put, but from the 2/3 they don't get anything. Yeah. So sometimes you just do these games for paperwork, to make paperwork easy, and not that I actually want her to be a partner in the house. If it's for paperwork, okay, that doesn't apply. Paperwork can do whatever, but Shar'an, okay, he's the owner. He's just like, for example, put her name for paperwork for ease of sake. But if no, he's like, no, we're buying it together, and you and I, for example, are partners. 50-50, we own the house. So when he dies, he only had 50% of the house. So he can't say, for example, yes, the whole house goes to her, unless that's part of the 1/3. Does it make sense? Yeah, so the other heirs will also get, because he owns half a house, so the other heirs will also get, if, for example, let's say it's not part of his 1/3. Yeah. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
You mentioned about Radd Madhalim. And Radd Madhalim, if I don't know the person and I have to pay him 1.5 million, whom
Yeah.
do I pay to?
Okay, yeah. So that's very good. Radd Mazalim, in fiqh actually, there's no like term in the narrations called Radd Madhalim. It's actually called Majhulul Malik. Majhulul Malik means wealth that belongs to someone where either I don't know that person or I know that person but I don't have access to him. In both cases, which is what happens in Radd Mazalim, in that case, that money will be given to a Shia faqir person and based on ihtiyat wajib with the permission of the marja. So you can't just go and give the poor person directly. You have to get permission from the hakim or the marja, and then he'll give you permission. Then it goes to a Shia faqir person. Yeah.
Number 2 is the wasi. If he is in the will of the deceased and he is not aware about it,
Yeah.
and he finds out that if I am the wasi and it will be extremely difficult for me to carry out the duties,
Yeah.
can he not appoint, but can he abscond himself?
So if it's extremely difficult for him to carry out, then say, okay, it's not wajib for him. In that case, actually, then the Hakim Ashar has to appoint an executor over here. So he cannot say that, okay, you take my place. No, okay, you have to do it. If you can't do it, then the Hakim will appoint someone. He cannot appoint somebody else.
Okay, I
Yeah.
give you a practical example. If the testator has written down number 1 and number 2, and then he says if anything happens to 1 or number 2, then number 3 will take over.
Yeah, that's fine.
So if number 1 says I'm withdrawing,
Yeah.
can number 3 automatically take the place?
So he said that 1 and 2 have to do it together.
Yes, 1 and 2 to do together.
Yeah, and 1 says, no, I'm stepping back.
Yes.
Then even no, number 3 will not take the position of number 1. The Hakim has to appoint someone to replace number 1 because he said 1 and 2 have to do it together.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is number 1, number 2, number 3.
Yeah.
Number 1, number 2, number 1 cannot, it's extremely difficult for him.
Okay, it's fine.
So because number 2 is mentioned, number 3 is mentioned.
Yeah, so it depends how you mention it. If you say 1 and 2 have to work together,
Yeah.
and then if both of them are not there, then obviously we'll come to number 3. But 1 and 2 have to work together. So 1 steps back and says, I can't do it, it's too difficult for me. In this case, the Hakim has to appoint someone to replace number 1. You can't put number 3 over there. You can tell the Hakim that, look, he put number 3. The Hakim can say, okay, put number 3 as number 1. But the Hakim has to do it. The Marja has to do it. You have to go and get permission to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And last question is...
So that's why, by the way, the advice was that if you put someone as your wasi, tell them. Don't make them get a heart attack after you die that, oh, okay, now this is your responsibility. Tell them and get them to accept. While you're alive, they can reject.
Yeah.
So make sure you tell them that, yeah, you are in charge.
Now, if I say, or if I write down my car goes to Habib Mazahir after my death,
Yeah.
will that be given to you because it is after my death?
Yeah, so the
So
whole
will
point
it
of
go
the
in
will...
will it go in the estate or will it be given to you outright?
So if at the time of your death, your total estate that you have, okay, is, let's say, for example, I don't know, 100 million, and that car is less than a third, equal to less than a third, then yes, that will is fine, and alhamdulillah, I get your car. If it's not, let's say you only had a car, then no, okay, I can't take that car. Now we're stuck, and now, for example, we'll have to sit and see how we can liquefy the car, and I get 1/3 of your car.
Bas barabar chi, that's one thing. Now, and, there is a question here from, it says that in terminal illness,
Yeah.
can the 2/3 be distributed in advance?
No, you can't distribute in advance. The distribution will only happen after your death.
Shukran.
Question?
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are 2 sons, and one son says, I'm giving my share to my brother, yeah? Now that extra, and if that second, if the brother doesn't use it in a year, then does khums becomes wajib? Because in inheritance
Yeah,
there's no...
It's not inheritance. So your khums is wajib, yes. Because he received it as a gift, technically speaking. The second one, that amount would not count as inheritance. He only had that original amount as inheritance. That other part that he got bonus was a gift from his brother. So khums will be wajib if it's not used in a year.
And another question is that you said that if, say, the house goes to the wife and the heirs have to, like they agree for $20,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And suppose the wife dies first, then what happens?
So this whole transfer will only happen after this person dies. So if she died first, okay,
You said that he could do it during his life.
yeah, so in his life, what has happened is that he has got their permission to use more than his 1/3. But even that usage, it'll come into reality after he dies. So for example, even let's say he says that, okay, even from the 1/3, he says, okay, this laptop will go to Saj Nairobi, for example, okay, only after I die will this laptop go. Same with the house. Only after I die will it go to the wife, even though after their permission, only after I die will it go to her. So if she dies during my lifetime, then okay, there's nothing. Now you go and change your will now, because okay, there's no point. She's not there anymore. Yeah.
And the last question. Yesterday you mentioned in the majlis that during terminal sickness, the men can do a distribution, right? Now, of 1/3 of his.
Yeah.
Suppose he uses that 1/3, and then after his death, will that 1/3 still he gets it or no?
No. So we will see that, okay, at the time of his death, how much was the 1/3 coming to? And then in retrospect, we'll see that, okay, was his action proper or not? So at the time of calculating the 1/3, this that he has used at his terminal illness will also be counted as part of it.
So he won't get extra?
No, he won't get extra. Yeah.
So just on this same note of the terminal illness, you said Ayatollah Khoi has a different ruling where you can distribute all.
He says terminal illness, no illness, doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want with your wealth while you're alive.
So this ruling of Sistani, can you maybe clarify the terminology a bit better so that we can understand? Is it wajib? Is that his hukum?
It's wajib.
Okay.
It's not ihtiyat. Terminal illness, if I can even check for you, I'm pretty sure it's not ihtiyat. So terminal illness, there's no option of ruju over here, and he must stick to the 1/3 that he has. Yeah. Yeah.
In the case of terminal illness, does he have to dispose of his 1/3?
No. He may. Yeah, he may. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's Salah time. Maybe we can take the rest of the questions after the session, after Asif Karim's session, if there is time at that point. So for now, I think we'll just break and we'll continue the questions later on, inshallah. Please write a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله. والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Ahsantum, Brother Irfan. Just one more thing before we continue. Inshallah, Alhamdulillah, the recording is going to be uploaded after this. It is not live right now, but inshallah, after the program is done, we shall have the recording accessible, inshallah. Nextly, we'll have the next program, which is going to be taken through by Asif Uncle Karim. Asif Uncle, unfortunately, I won't be able to talk much about you, because if I do, I think we'll finish all the time over here. So Asif Uncle, right now, mostly where it might be relevant is he is now into mediation and arbitration. So he's very well versed with the law. So I think this will definitely bring a very nice insight, and let's see what he has to say, inshallah. With that, Asif Uncle, Bismillah. Thank you.
First and foremost, I want to thank the Saj Tabligh for organizing this very important discussion, what I call the contemporary issues in our day-to-day world. And it's nice to be back on this podium after 13 years. Sheikh Habib gave a very intense lecture. It was quite deep. I'm sure it took a lot of mind on what we went through, and it was not very easy for him because this is something that needs a full day to go through that. So I'm sure down the road the Tabligh committee will consider maybe doing a one-day, full-day workshop so that we can go through it in a more on-depth. But this is, I'm sure, a good eye-opener for the entire community that is participating here today. Obviously, I'm not going to go into the Sharia issues. It's been well covered. I am going to give you my experience now that I'm involved in alternate dispute resolution with the court and in arbitration, and several things do come up. So what I'm going to do today is, of course, I also want to make it interactive. It's not going to be a monologue. I would want people to participate in some of the things that I will mention and want to seek your views, because we are all here to learn from one another. Nobody knows everything, so I'm also here to learn, like you all are here to learn from one another. So let me start with a little brief. I don't call this document the will. I would like to call it the farewell document. My last love letter to my family. So that it becomes more positive, because for many people, when you talk about writing a will, it's like talking about a death sentence. In many communities in Kenya and around the world, they get very fidgety when you talk about writing a will. It gives them fear. It gives them uncomfortable. It feels like death is now 100% coming tomorrow. And that is not the case. So if we change the mindset, it needs a total mindset that what do I want for my family and myself when I'm down there, for me to go smooth, because there are responsibilities even when you die. And there's equal responsibilities that you are leaving with your loved ones. So it is very important to take this a little bit more candidly and not get intimidated with this situation, because this is part and parcel of one's life. We are all going to die. I'm not a sheikh, but there's an ayat that says, Kullu nafsin zaikatul maut. Everybody is going to face death. So we are all heading towards death, sooner or later. With that, salawat. So let me give a brief couple of comments just to refresh on what Shk Habib said and my own views on this matter. What does one as an individual want to happen after one dies or pass on? What do you want? All of us want to see a smooth transition for oneself hereafter and for those ones remaining in the world. There are several aspects and areas that one needs to review, address for oneself and their loved ones. I will give a little brief on 3 or 4 areas that one needs to review, and I suggest you make some points or notes or in your mind, and we can also have a Q&A. And as I said earlier, we will want to make it a dialogue so that we can all participate in these discussions, clear something that's in our head or something that's, and there is no such thing as a bad question. If it's in your mind, it's important. So feel free to share whatever you wish to do. And there is no one young to write a will. If you are over 18 and in sound mind, you qualify to write a will. There are 4 reasons why one should write a will. It is not only a legal document, it is a final act of love. It illustrates your care, your responsibility, and protection towards your family. It prevents family disputes. Losing a loved one is extremely painful. A will removes uncertainty over how your assets should be distributed. A will gives you the power to dispose of your assets in a manner that you choose and protect your values and legacy. A will protects your children, your spouse, and vulnerable dependents like your aged parents or minor children. A will is not a death sentence, as I said earlier. It is a love letter. It needs a complete shift in the mindset. A will is a living document. It can be changed or revoked any time before you die, as circumstances change. Do not wait for the right time. The right time is now. Now, I'm going to, this is a new thing that has come in, and before I go into the will, there's a new concept that is now becoming more prevalent with most families, and it's called a living will. So before I give the explanation of what a living will is, would anybody like to volunteer and tell me or tell us what is in your interpretation a living will? Any volunteers, or I can pick somebody from the floor? I'll start with the man. Any volunteer here? I think firstly you would be the right start for us. No clue. All right. Firstly has no clue. Any other who doesn't have a clue? Raise hands up. Okay. You have a clue. Okay. Please tell us. Shania Basdosa. Please give him a mic so that we can all hear.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I think the way I understand it, like a living will, like maybe just before I pass away, I can like distribute my shares and everything. Is it something like that?
Okay, that's his. Anybody would like to agree or disagree with him? Dr. Molidina, we need to hear your voice. I know these are the regular guys who speak, so they will give us the comfort and give everybody the comfort of speaking.
A living will is whatever I possess, I want to distribute to my loved ones in my presence, and then explain them that after my death, this is the final departure will, and I don't want any dispute, and get their signatures and everything, so there is no dispute after I leave this world.
Okay. Anybody from the ladies would like to volunteer? Yes, Mrs. Karim. I guess I've told her, that's why, yeah? Okay, all right. So let me explain. When we say a living will is something where you are alive, but you are not in a position to make a decision. Because when you talk about a will, you know, what doctor said and what Shaniba said was good points, but that is something you're doing while you're alive. So the idea of a will is when you are no longer around. So a living will is something where you are alive, but you are not in a position to make a decision. Can somebody give me an example of when that would be, or what could be a situation like that? Mohsin Sharif, any suggestion? Good answer. Yes, coma is one. So you are alive, but you are not in a position to make a decision. Anybody, any other? Sorry? Dementia is another one. Thank you. From the ladies? Sorry? Life support, okay. That's similar to coma, yeah. So that's one example that when, for example, you are in a hospital, God forbid you are in an accident and you are on the surgery table and the doctor walks in, let's say the man is on that bed, and you got the wife standing here and you got the children standing there. And the doctor walks in and says, look, this guy is not in a good shape. So what would you like me to do? Because these are the two options. We let him go, or do we put him on life support, which we don't know what will happen? So who makes the decision? Who? Wife, okay. Anybody else? Sorry? Family, as a family, okay. And if there is a difference of view, if the wife says, no, I know him, let him go. The children say, no, I'm going to recite Dua Ashura every day, Surah Yasin, and he'll be fine. So there's a difference of view. What happens? Who should make the decision? Dr. Mazahir, your view? Can you give me a mic, please, so the ladies can also hear?
So there's a medical document that we ask a lot of people to be aware of, especially when they are dealing with specific terminal illnesses, or if they're at that age where the risk of death is very high. Then we ask them to have that document, we call it a DNR medically, where you have the right, before you fall into that state where you are not able to respond at all, or not be sensibly able to respond, let's say you get into a mental illness, you can, while you are still in your senses, make a decision to state very clearly that if I am faced in such a situation, I do not want, for example, to be put on a ventilator. I do not want to be put on, to be shocked with a defibrillator. I do not want to be put on dialysis, but everything else is fine. So you have an option of choosing that before the event happens. And medically, we make the patients who we think are at high risk of that sign that we call it a do not resuscitate option form, DNR form. I don't know if this is
okay,
relevant.
Thank you. I'll park that answer. Anybody, any other answer? Anybody with a different comment or anything else different? So who makes the decision on that?
So ideally in that situation, as doctors, when we go to the patients, if they do have a DNR, and it is recorded and it is something that has been signed by the patient when they were in that situation, then we follow the will of that person. And if there isn't anything like that, then we tend to ask who is the next of kin or the guardian. And that next of kin who has been appointed during the time of an admission to hospital or during the time of any other is the one who is given the authority to decide on your behalf.
Okay, good answer. Assuming you don't have, what do you call it, the DNR? If you don't have that form, who makes the decision?
So either the next of kin, which is when you are being admitted, you normally have a guardian or a next of kin who will be the one who is also going to be approached for footing your bills, and also the one who is going to be the decision maker on your behalf in case you do enter that state. So we call it a next of kin in hospital, but I believe guardians and all fit in that circumstance.
Okay, good answer. But let me go one step far. If the next of guardian is the wife, in case of the husband there, and the children, and they differ, what happens? The wife says something and the children say something else. Who do we listen? Who does the doctor listen to?
So that's the legal aspect. Is basically what happens is that it needs to be, one person needs to be liable as far as hospitals are concerned, and that's when a person's coming in. That point of care is a person who is taking charge of the family's decisions together. And that person, if they differ, they come in and they say, this is how it's to be done legally, because the hospitals are scared that if we listen to two conflicting, who should we follow, and then the blame comes on the hospital. So we make, on entry into the hospital, a person sign a document that I am agreeing to be the next of kin. And the person who is being admitted agreeing that this is my next of kin. That document, when you go to hospitals and we just sign, okay, the first time you get to be known to a hospital, you fill a form. That next of kin is your person who will make your decisions for you as far as hospitals are concerned. Okay.
I hear you that, but now what happens in a practical scenario where I said earlier that the wife says something and the children say something, there is a conflict there. And it can be a very traumatic situation. So what is the best way to do it? The best way is to do what I just said earlier, a living will, where you, because it's your life, your body, and you make it clearly that if you are, God forbid, if you are ever in that position, if you are ever in that situation, what should happen to you? Who should make the decision? You know, there's normally what we call power of attorney also is there. So I just want you to reflect this very deeply, because this is something I'm sure for most of you, you are hearing it for the first time or are new about this matter, but these are things that does happen. And it can be a very awkward situation. So coma, hospitalization is one area. Any other area where living will can come in place? Another one, I'm looking for one more. Ahmad? Any? Amir Ali? Okay. Sipten, my friend? Anything? Jimmy, anything? Another area is when a person gets a stroke or is not in a position to make a decision. It can happen to anybody. So the question is, when you are in that position, what should happen to you? Who will make the decision for you? Because if you have not planned for it on what should happen to you, then obviously the guardian or the next to the kin or your children or your wife will decide what they think is correct. Obviously they would think the best for you, but you may not agree with what they are, but you are not in a position to talk. You cannot speak. You are majboor, if I can use that word. You are in a very tight situation. I'm sure doctors, you have gone through these things. So it's a very important thing to think about it. And don't think for too long. I would say document it. You know, it's very, very important, because I am talking through some experience in the market. I've seen situations that does happen in the market. So something to think about. So before I go on to that, anybody would like to ask me a question or would like to add something to what I said, or something that's not clear? Yes, doctor. Do I call you chairman or doctor?
Whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Just a point of note that this is an extremely important conjuncture that you have brought us towards. I would like us also to realize that it's not only an individual decision. It has some implications on the family, number one, and number two, it has some severe religious implications. There are some things that are not allowed for us to stop. For example, according to Ayatollah Sistani, if a person has a chance, the smallest chance of survival, he is not allowed to even himself refuse specific interventions by the doctor. So before we go into that individual written living will or DNR or whatever that you want to put as a request or as a suggestion for your own end of life, preferably not to be in hospital, etc., it's very important that you have a meeting or a discussion with specific ulama who will guide you on the Islamic principles of what may not be allowed for you to stop, for example, just as a suggestion.
Thank you. I think that's well noted. But the point is to have something in document instead of leaving it in a confusion state where the repercussions for a family can be very, very tough. I know of cases where the mother and the children don't talk for so many years because one made a decision in good faith, it didn't work out, it went the other way. So now they are not talking, and you lose a generation before they reconcile. You know, but that's the harsh reality. Yes, Agha Murad Khani, Befana.
The guy who is going to make will, he has received Alzheimer, and he can do decision, but changing the mind because of the Alzheimer matter. So what will happen on that situation?
I didn't follow what you said.
Alzheimer.
Yeah, so
because there is decision changing because of this Alzheimer sicknesses. So what will happen on that situation?
It's the same situation on living will. You know, when you talk about, it's more, well, close to being disabled. You know, when you talk about Alzheimer, you are not in a position to make a decision. You are not in a good state to be in a normal faculty to make a decision. So all those areas fall under the living will, where you are alive, but you are not capable of making a decision. So anything, is there any example? So for me, coma is one, disability is another one, Alzheimer is another one, where you are alive, but you're not in the position to make. So we can again have an offline for those who want more discussion on this, so that in the interest of time I can move forward. Final comment before I move on from the ladies, anybody? Okay, I guess they're fully understood. Salawat. So let me now go into will, the proper will that we're talking about, and it was all addressed, most of it, but let me recap again. It's important that you state clearly who you are, which faith you are following, your family, who will inherit. And it's very important, as Sheikh said, 2 executors, but I'm not sure whether he mentioned, but we also need 2 witnesses. It's very important to have 2 witnesses with their IDs or some documentation to know who, because it can be anybody to sign and you don't even know who that person is. So it's advisable for the authenticity of the will to have an ID or a passport copy of the person that you have decided who to have the witness. Executors, extremely important, and it's important that I know he did mention that it is good that the executors know about it. I would say it's paramount that they know about it. And I would go one step forward to say that your will must, I'm using that word, not that you have to, must be read to your family. They must be aware of what your intentions are or what you have decided. By keeping it quiet is a lot of anxiety comes in, a lot of uncertainty comes in, and this affects mostly the women. Because in our community, mostly the men are really the breadwinners or the main breadwinners. Of course, things are now changing, and also our ladies are also progressing in the economy world, but there's a lot of anxiety in the families on the matter. So I strongly feel that a will should be shared, read to the family members so that they know what the expectations are or what is the father or the breadwinner wants to do. And secondly, while I'm talking about it, it seems very light that it is only the men who have to write the will. The women also have to write a will. Because when you talk about assets, assets is not only a house. Assets is also jewelry. Assets is also clothes. Assets is also your M-Pesa on your M-Pesa account. That's money. Only you know the number, what the number is, right? So there could be many other issues that they are there. So it's important that women must also write a will, equivalent. It's not that it has to be men only or women only. It is for all living human beings, as I said earlier, who are over 18, are in sound mind, and have something or the other that they can pass it on. The other thing which the Sheikh also mentioned was the Islamic responsibilities. Namaz is one, fasting is another, the common ones that happen, Hajj, Khums, and all that. So when we talk about writing it, we need to be more specific. A lot of people say, I have a will. But when you look at that will, you are like, this is going to take you nowhere. So it's one thing to write a will, and it's one thing to have a solid will that is very clear. There is no ambiguity on the matter, on who needs to be done. For example, you say, I have 10,000 pounds of khums to pay. Okay, so to pay who? Maybe I would prefer XYZ to be given. You prefer the one who's executing wants to give it to somebody else. So why not be more specific? Who are you giving the responsibility? Well, we said that the elder son is responsible for the father's prayers and all the religious obligations. But does he want to do it? What if you put him and he doesn't do it? So a lot of this, the reason why I'm bringing this up is more of provoking your mind, something for you to think about, because it's not one fit all. Everybody has different experiences, have different views, have different challenges, and different family backgrounds, family issues. So it's something to think about on how to handle that. Well, another sensitive issue. When one dies, for example, if the man dies, the wife now is a widow. So can she remarry? I know it's sensitive what I'm saying, but it's a reality, or vice versa. So a lot of guilt is kept. Do I get married? I'm at an advanced age, I need some company, I have nobody. So is it worth mentioning in the will? Something to think about. The other issue that we talk about is death. Obviously, that is the first thing where we said that what do you need to do when one dies? So today, globally, we all travel all over the world, right? So let's take an example, somebody going to China, and he dies there. So what happens to his body? Anybody? What should happen? Zairabas. What should happen? He dies in China. What should we do? Bury him where? There, okay? But the wife says, no, tomorrow, yeah, વાર અહીંયા આવવું જોઈએ નેરોબીમાં તો કબ્રસ્તાને જાઉં કરી શકો હવે તો ટાર્મેક થઈ ગયું છે ને કાબરો થઈ ગયું છે so is easier. So then what happens? Huh? Sorry? Fly to China, okay? Any other answer? Bring him here, okay? Thank you. That's what I was looking for. She said it should be written in the will what should happen. Does anybody disagree? Are we in agreement what she said? So if it is written, then the ambiguity goes. The second issue we have, now today the children live far apart, we are here, parent dies. So no, boro maro chokro આવે છે અમેરિકાથી. So we have to wait 3 days. So who decides? Ghulam Abbas, your view. Family decides, okay? Why family? So I'm asking, why family? Okay, so if the family disagrees, then if the wife says, no, આજે થર્સડે છે બને સારો દિવસ છે શનિવાર સારો દિવસ નથી તો આજે છે ને કિડ્સ છે નો ઉપર અમે આવે છે વી આર ટેકન અ ફ્લાઇટ વી આર કમિંગ ઓલ ધ વે ફ્રોમ ન્યુયોર્ક શનિવાર ક્યાં દૂર છે so there is a conflict. So what is a better option is what Jimmy just said. Maybe you can repeat? Write it in your will. So what's the message I'm giving here? The message I'm trying to give here is try and document because it is your life. It is your body. How would you want it? Of course, before you write, you're consulting your better half and say, look, this is what I want, and then you come to a consensus. But when you put things in writing, ambiguity and disagreements minimize. But if the person who has written it that this is how I want, and he's already informed his family that if I die, I'll be buried in 12 hours, or whatever he's decided. Or he might say, no, mara chokra bada ave, kobro ek week. Yes, Hasne.
Discover that what is written in the will is not aligned with Sharia. If he says, I want to be buried after a week, is that how we know that we reconcile?
Well, I mean, is Sheikh around? Because I don't see. Oh, he's here. Okay, but before he answers, I'll give my interpretation and then he can. Did you hear the question? So, I don't think it says it's wajib to bury him immediately. It is recommended highly to bury him as soon as possible because that is what the body is required underground. And it is also, I'm sure you will all agree that there's so much anxiety when somebody dies, close ones. But the moment you bury, the feeling changes a little bit. You feel a completion, a responsibility, something that you feel you have. I don't know if I'm valid in what I'm saying this. it gives you a little closure in terms of what you want. Yes?
So, for example, you have not discussed with your family that where you want to be buried, etc. And you've written it in your will, and you die elsewhere. And nobody opens a will until you're buried. Then what happens?
So that's where I'm saying that share the will with your family.
If you haven't.
If you haven't, then it's a judgment call. Then it's a difficult situation. Then it's a family to sit, discuss, and agree, and hopefully everybody agrees, which is a very traumatic time. Death, as you know, or even when our family is in the hospital, it's a very traumatic situation. It's not an easy situation. Especially when there's no insurance and there's money to be paid. Decisions are different. The doctor is, with all due respect to doctors, also, taking you around. You don't know which area to take them, with due respect to the doctor. Yeah. I'm sure you will agree also. I'm not talking about you as a doctor, but, some other doctor. And of course, you are excluded, and Dr. Moledina is excluded in that. Any other doctors here that I've missed out? Or from the ladies? Yeah. No? Mohsin Sharif, so with due respect, yeah. But I don't think he's practicing medical. He's not. Yeah. So, I hope I've answered you. Anybody else would like to say on that? Yes, please. If contrary to what I said, yeah.
No, in theory, yes, that is correct. That it wouldn't count as an example of something that is haram. But this does raise a good question that if you do state something in the will that is haram, okay, not this example, anything. Say, for example, you say something about like your organ donations, for example, putting all the minute details aside in such a way that it's considered haram. Then anything that is not allowed Sharia-wise, we put in the will, that part becomes invalid. So it's not allowed for the executor to then implement that. You just simply ignore that part.
Thank you for that. What about cremation? If the will says cremate me, Sheikh, your view?
Exactly. So that's haram.
That's another one. Yeah. Yes, please.
In this case, which you are talking about, if somebody has a haram investment, then what happens in that inheritance?
Please, if you can take the mic so that the ladies can hear you. Okay, how many people, as I'm coming to my conclusion, how many people here know or have heard or have read in the newspaper about family disputes after the person dies? Oh, you haven't heard? Everybody is okay. And how do you feel about that when you see that? Painful. Any other word? Huh? Unfortunate. Another one? Sad. Another one? Okay. Further disputes in the family. Okay. Sorry? Correct. So I think that's the punchline. So what should one do? Don't die is one. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Be Jesus Christ. Come back after 3 days. Yeah. Okay. Any other? Don't own anything. That's another one. Okay. So you give away everything. Shanti, no headache. Huh? Repair. Prepare. Yeah, in management there is a saying, people don't plan to fail. They fail to plan. So it's very important that we must plan because nothing is going to happen on its own. I always give the example to wherever I speak. If I wanted to go to Mombasa tomorrow by car, am I just going to wake up in the morning, start the car and just go? I got to plan. I got to make sure the fuel is okay. I got to check my car is well oiled, pressure, clothes, Sambaro, Chevro, Pani, whatever. So it's a planning, and you got to know which direction to go. You're not just going to go drive wherever you feel like. You got to know which route to take and all that. So it's planning. So like that, anything in life, we must plan and think on that issue. So let me come. If there is anything you will take away this evening from my little talk, is what I'm going to talk about now. is what I just touched on, what we call the dispute resolution. No matter how much good that you write in a will, there are people who will be mischievous. There will be people who will want to provoke a situation. Or people genuinely are not happy about something. So what do normal people do? Can anybody give me an answer? When they're not happy with a will, what does the aggrieved person do? Fazla. Go to court, stop it. Anything else? Chief Qadi, okay. Seeks guidance on the ground. So let me give you the best option. Because when you go to court, that is most of the time, does anybody know how backlog cases there are in court? I'm sure you all know. I don't need to explain, right? Today, I'm recently appointed in the Court of Appeal. Now, Court of Appeal mediation and cases there, 7 years behind. They are 7 years behind on Court of Appeal cases. So just imagine on a High Court, how many cases are there. So this is what I would advise everybody to put in their will, among all these other things that we are talking about, called dispute resolution. If for whatever reason there is a dispute, now the dispute can be from the beneficiaries, the dispute could be between the executor and the beneficiary. It has happened in our community. What you need to do is put a dispute resolution clause where you say that if for whatever reason there is any dispute, we will first sit and negotiate and try and resolve it. Should it fail, then you ask a body here called Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, Kenya, to appoint a mediator to try and resolve this dispute. Failing that, you would want them to arbitrate and make a decision. Now, why do I say that? First of all, you want to bring a closure to this matter, because hanging that, there are cases, I did one case of great-grandchildren fighting for something that their great-grandparents had a fight in 1990. Now, look at the relationship that has been spoiled. These great-grandchildren had nothing to do with the whatever dispute that was then. They don't talk to each other, there is bad blood, the children are not talking to one another, it's a complete mess. Because the time takes too long. But when you go into mediation, because that's where the parties make the decision. Just for educating for those who are not aware, the difference between mediation and arbitration. Mediation is when two people have a problem, the mediator comes in and helps the parties, but they make the decision, which is the best way to solve a dispute, because it's a win-win situation, it's a give and take situation, and you move on. If that fails, then you go into arbitration, where the arbitrator now is the judge, who listens to both parties and makes the decision, is the finality. So you bring the dispute to a closure as fast as possible. When you go to court, you say, Nana maru hak chamane amalwa joy. Well, you might get your hak maybe 20, 30 years down the road, you might not even be there. So it needs a little common sense, it needs a little bit of education on how to resolve disputes. And that type of disputes is not only in will, it's in our business, it's in our families, among our friends, in the Jamaat, in the managing committee, among the trustees. Everywhere where there are people, there will be difference of views. There will be difference of opinion. So we need to create a good way of resolving our differences, because everybody is entitled to what they want to, but we must come to consensus on many, but more so when it comes to inheritance and family disputes. Any comments on that? Any agreements or disagreements? Or a contrary view? Muslim, waiting for you. With a mic, please.
Sorry. Assalamu
alaikum.
Can the tester appoint an ombudsman to deal with this situation, a specific person?
Well, I mean, it's matter of how he wants. So what you're trying to say that if there is a dispute, I appoint X, Y, Z and his decision is final. For sure, why not?
Apart from the trustees.
Yeah, well, executors, let's use the word executors.
Okay, I wanted you to clarify also this. Trustees, executors, and there are three words. Trustees, executors, and this is the differences between them. But then I'm saying the trustees are there.
For a will, normally the language used is executors.
Executors.
So they are the ones who are supposed to execute the person who's died, his will.
And the third one is administrator. So what's the difference?
I don't know.
These three words, three are being used.
But for will, I'm more comfortable using the word executor. But what you are asking is that if there was a dispute, then can somebody else make the decision? Yes. If the person who's writing the will wants it that way, so be it. The idea is what? Not to go to court.
Yeah.
So what should be done for us not to go to legal? Because remember, going legal is putting good money to bad money. And again, with all due respect, if there are any lawyers here, I always tell people that when you go to a lawyer, the first meeting, he is at your mercy. The first meeting. You tell him, he will listen to you and agree on everything. Thereafter, till doomsday, you are at his mercy. You agree, Jimmy? So, let's try and minimize it, because the lawyers will tell you what you want to hear, not what you need to hear. There's a big difference in that one word. So it's important to find a way, which is the best way, that if there was a dispute, how can we resolve it? What is the best way to resolve it? And if that is what one person wants, then fine. But you can bring an independent person, which is a body that appoints the mediator and the arbitrator. Or you can also say that I want XYZ to mediate, provided he's willing. But you also keep that provision that if he refuses or if he dies, then where do you go? So when you give it to an institution, it does not matter who it is, because the institution will remain there. So you bring in a professional, mediator or an arbitrator to resolve the matter. Ghulam Abbas, yes. Mike, please.
Sorry. Do we have a body in our Jamaat that attends to disputes within our community pertaining properties and whatever?
Thank you.
Something that somebody overlooks and helps people, guide them in the right way.
Thank you for that. I think that's a very important thing, and I would like to just share my experience during the few years that I was in chair. Traditionally, we have a marriage dispute. That's how it was known. That we only thought that there is only a marriage dispute. There's no other dispute. So we changed the word to call it Dispute Resolution Committee. So any form of dispute. There could be a dispute between two members. I mean, we have cases when one person gives money to another and then payments don't come. That's a dispute. But here again, let me add something more. And it's in our Sharia, and I want to be guided by the Sheikh. The Sharia strongly recommends that even if you're giving money to your own brother, put it in writing. That I've given you so much money and these are the terms and conditions we do, so that there is a document that can, in case something goes wrong. All our intentions are good. When we want to help somebody, when we want to do something, it is done in good spirit. But things change. So all I'm saying, be proactive. Don't be reactive. That when there is a problem is then when you wake up. So I think the chairman is a better place to answer. Maybe we give him the mic to answer. Well,
yeah, so yeah, Alhamdulillah, as you have said, Asif Uncle, that we do have a dispute resolution committee, and it's currently being headed by Dr. Imran Versi, and through this dispute resolution committee we are getting multiple different levels of dispute being brought about, including financial, including others, and we haven't closed the door to say that we don't deal with any of that. Any dispute is being trying to be handled in the most proficient way and professional way as possible. We are involving whoever is the specialist in that specific field. If it's marital, then we have a very robust marital team, that marital counseling team, marital dispute trained team. If it's related to issues for property, then we are involving issues, people like the lawyers or whatever is required from us. And of course, that would fall under the trustees of Jamaat if it's something to do with properties related to Jamaat. So things like that we are involving, and the committee is active, alhamdulillah, and we keep progressing, inshallah.
Thank you. I think that answers. Yes, Muslim. We'll take another 5 minutes and then we close. I have, is that Savar? Yeah, after Muslim. Maybe we can just give her the mic, please. Yeah, Muslim.
It is an honor for Nairobi that you are appointed as the chairman of Dispute Resolution of Africa Federation. And I hope the disputes are coming from all over Africa and it's keeping you busy.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Next.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
A question from myself, which has been bothering me a bit, is that a couple married recently had a child of about 11, 12 months, and the husband dies. So the child is, of course, the, whatever he inherits from the father, yeah? And the mother is there. By the time the child becomes baligh, see, who is this? Even this has to be documented as well.
Yes, what we call guardianship. So there's a guardian not only for finance, for day-to-day life also, in terms of whether it's schooling, madrasa, day-to-day life and everything. So there's a guardian appointed. Hopefully he had a will and he had appointed a guardian.
Okay.
There is no will.
There's no will. Because you see, when you just get married, and this, sometimes you wait for quite long to write a will, to think about it. And that's what I've seen, that it has been a great family dispute, because this child was of course, non-baligh. And then how the other side of the family went away with a lot of things that were meant for the child.
So you're talking about a dispute between the widow and the in-laws?
Yeah, because it happens, yeah,
Of course. So by what you just said, what should happen in future?
Yeah.
What would you advise?
Of course, documented, but you see, because we are the ones, you see, this has to be an eye-opener for everybody.
Correct.
That once we are doing the marriage certificate, or even before that, but we must have all this, that, okay, write your will.
I agree. Thank you. I agree with that. I'm sure it's been well noted, and you touched on a point, and I want to just digress a little bit on what she just said. In Malaysia, if one goes for marriage, like even here we have requirements, right, Mama Jafar? We have a requirement before nikah is recited. In Malaysia, there is an added requirement. Have you gone for premarital counseling? There is a course for 6 months. I had that book when I was chairing. I'm trying to look for that book. It was such a useful book. Premarital counseling. And I think this is something I would advocate the managing committee to review, to look at it at managing committee level, at Africa level, because that is where all these issues come up. Where what happens if something of that happens. So premarital counsel includes what she just talked about. So it's very important, because I'm sure my age people, we never went through that. We never had we were just thrown in the deep end, and we, okay. We were thrown in the deep end, and we navigated, or we're still navigating on the matter. Yeah. So, another couple of comments? Yes, Fazle. Mike is there.
Alhaj Asif, thank you very much for sharing your insights. I have two queries which I hope you can shed some light on, or then maybe through the floor we can get some insights. Number one, what is the tax implication of inheritance, both for locally held estate or estate held outside the domicile of Kenya, and in some cases there may be untaxed, undeclared assets. So how best does somebody then say, how will this affect, and whether there is something we need to think about? Of course, you can't state on your will that I've got $200 million sitting in a number Swiss account and which have not been taxed. But is there a particular consideration that needs to be made as you prepare for that final love letter, as you called it? Number one. Number two, in your site, what is the exact steps to be taken? A family member passes away today. We have completed his funeral rites. We've read his will before, after, whatever. But what do we do before the will can be executed? Is there a I mean, we hear about the word probate. How does the probate work?
Okay.
Who do we go to? Where do we go? So, besides writing a will, there's first few steps before the actual discussion of the splitting of the assets comes up.
Thank you. I think the first one, I think there is nobody better than Muhammad Raza Jimmy Merali sitting here to answer that question on the tax implications on this matter. So, mic to Muhammad Raza.
Thank you very much. As far as inheritance, and you're talking about tax, in Kenya there is no inheritance tax. So, and when somebody passes away, then I don't think KRA can come back to you and say, listen, this money that was accumulated was without payment of taxes. It would be very difficult for them to do so, but I'm sure my tax department can probably answer that better than me. So that's about it. But in UK or any other places, there is inheritance tax, and it is quite severe. The tax is probably at 40%. So that would come into place.
40% after, I think, 600,000 pounds, or is it 1.2?
350,000 pounds is the limit. If you have more than 350, then the inheritance tax comes in.
Which is 40%.
Which is 40%.
Yeah, we don't have any. The second question, sorry, can I, same thing? Yeah, go ahead, Mike, please, Mike.
Probably Brother Jimmy can answer. What about the foreign funds which are in Bank of England and they have to be brought here? What happens?
I suggest you take an appointment with Baker Tilly and get a consultancy on that one.
I can answer.
Yeah?
In Kenya, there is no foreign exchange regulation. So you can have money anywhere in the world. And you can, yeah, you can bring it.
Without declaring?
No, he has to declare.
That's okay, the second question that Fazle put is on what is the process. So when a person dies, and of course you finish with the funeral, then you need to go to your lawyer for him to do the probate and all of that. And that also takes almost 18 months. You know, the letter of confirmation is a long process. I'm sure we have all gone through in one way or another. So it's a long process, and this again reminds me of another point. I know of a case in this community where the husband died. He had received some good amount of money and he opened an account in his own name. And the husband dies. The wife was almost paralyzed. Because, and I think this is another serious thing that we need to maybe think about or talk about in another forum, is that there are a lot of husbands who don't share anything with their wives. They have no clue how many accounts they have, who they have to collect the money from, who they have to give the money to, remember, you are not around now. And we have agreed that you want to go in a better place where you have taken the responsibility for you, which is your obligation, as you will answer some questions down there, hopefully no questions, that you also got a responsibility for your family. I mean, I don't want you to answer, but you ask yourself and answer yourself. How many wives know how much money the husband has? Hardly anybody knows, or vice versa. Or vice versa. How many husbands know how much money they have? Oh, Muslim knows only, okay. Right, Ruby? He knows about it, yeah? So it's important to share that because you want to leave your family in a reasonable manner. But if you don't share that information, then how is it going to happen? So you don't want to leave them in a traumatic situation. So these are conversations that each family, each couple need to start. If they are not doing it, and if you are doing it, go a little deeper into this discussion because it's important. It's important, it affects everybody. There's nothing to hide, you're talking to your family, you know, even if there are some challenges. I always get fascinated in a funeral right here, and I think Mama Jafar or somebody makes a statement, the family say, marhum keche ke koi bhi kai mangto hai to humne janao. Really? Why do we need to make that statement? I mean, I'm not saying don't make the statement, but if it was documented, then you don't need to make that statement. Because everything is there. The family knows कि मने कोने पासे थी लेवाना चाहिए कि मने कोने देवाना चाहिए. Anybody with the last comment, and then I just will give one more comment, or let me finish this comment and then we'll give one comment to conclude. The other advice I would give that you should consider putting it in your will. You know, there are many wishes we all have as parents. I wish my children could do this. I wish and nowadays it's a challenge to tell our children to do things. They may listen, but it might be an opaque, or the ear is even blocked. You know, now, I remember when we were young, if we made mischief, my mom would say, "He kan me suni, he kan me ti bare." You remember that line? Now the line has changed. Now, he kan me suni, he kan me ti bare. It's an echo now. You know, it doesn't even go through. That's where we are right now. Am I right? That's the situation. So, there are many wishes you would like that, you know, after I die, I would like my family to do A, B, C, D, E. Put those in. Write it. It's nothing to do with Sharia. It's nothing to do with wajibat. It's your wishes. And the last suggestion I would give, remember, I'm talking this to the elders. We have had enough experience in this world. Good, bad, and the ugly. All of it. So give some advice to your children. Give them some advice. You know, it may help. It's something to add value to your family. Remember, you're creating a legacy. A legacy is something that outlives you. It still carries on, even when you're not around. So thank you very much. Anybody would like to give a final comment to close this, as I'm sure my time was up to 9 o'clock. We are 10 to 9, so any final?
So just a question.
Sorry?
A question.
Sorry, Fazlin.
Oh, sorry.
Do I mention? Okay. But okay, we'll create another workshop. We can bring it up at that time if it's okay. Yeah, because I'm going to bring that as a recommendation. Yes, Secretary.
So just to confirm from the legal aspect, after you have written the will and you've got the witnesses, the executors, their IDs, do you need to do anything further? Take it to a lawyer to register it or anything like that, or it's a legally sound document?
It is a legal document, but some people like to register it. And there is also a misconception that it is only lawyers who can write a will. No, you can write it yourself. You don't need any lawyer to do it, or you seek somebody else to write. So you don't have to do it. So I want to thank Saj, Tabligh Committee, for inviting me to share my views, my comments, with whatever little experience I have. And I want to thank the ladies and all the participants from the men for hearing me out. I wish you well. I will also give one recommendation to the Tabligh Committee. to have a workshop, a full one-day workshop on this will, because a lot of heavy things were discussed in the first session. It was quite deep, he was limited with time. We had to put in a lot of things, but I think this needs a full one-day workshop where we can invite tax experts to come in, we bring in a lawyer to come in, so that we exchange it, make it deeper, and take it to the next step. Because leaving it here and doing nothing will not be a good thing to do. We need to step up, and everybody sitting here needs to step up. If you have to argue with your husband, or if you have to argue with your wife on this matter, please argue, but get it done. It's a very important thing, and I would say it's non-negotiable. It must be done. So thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So in the last 10 or 15 minutes that we have, there are several questions that were left unanswered. First of all, there is some confusion about this, if somebody has invested in haram or not, and what should be done. Personally, I also have my reservations as well, and so I'll retract my answer and I'll say I need to look more into this, especially because in recent times, Atlas Thani has had difference of opinion about shares as a whole, and so there's a big Pandora's box over there too. So I will have to look more into this about what's to be done over there. But the primary principle still stands that if the will has something haram for you to do, then the executor cannot do that. Now there are several questions that were sent. One was, if somebody says that if somebody does not have a will, then what happens? Then that means that they didn't use their 1/3, and so the whole estate will be divided based on what the Sharia says. Another question was that what happens if someone has verbally told you and given you instructions for things to be given to, for example, their children after they pass away, but those things are lost or stolen before those items were given to them. So if they specifically say about specific items, that for example give, I don't know, this specific item, that specific item, and it gets lost or stolen, then you don't have any duty as such. If it gets stolen or lost in your possession before you could, for example, carry that out, yes, then, for example, there could be a discussion about are you liable or not. But if they didn't specify a specific item, and rather they said a specific proportion, like they told you verbally that, okay, from my estate, for example, give 5% to this person, of, for example, and for example, the estate, part of it got stolen. Let's say, or if, for example, the government took it. So that loss of 5% is going to be divided equally. It's not that you can put it on one person. So basically you'll say, okay, after that's gone, now what does the estate remain at? So for example, now the estate is at 95%. So now, for example, from this 95%, 1/3 is for the will and 2/3 is for the inheritance. Then there were a couple of questions over here about this terminal illness issue. So let me clarify what we mean by that. Like I said yesterday, that terminal illness, we mean that specifically an illness where urfan or people generally, when they hear that this person has this illness, they would say that, okay, this person now is close to their death, or for example, their death is guaranteed. So we're not talking about people who have another illness and then suddenly they die. So for example, they have a random fever at night and then things get worse and suddenly they die. No, this is not what we're talking about. Specifically illnesses that people know and say, yes, this person, for example, okay, he's close to death. 1, 2, he dies in that illness. So you could be having a terminal ill patient with cancer, for example, but he dies in a car accident. So this ruling does not apply to him. I mean, terminal ill person who dies in that illness. And 2, even that illness, if it's the case where it's going to last for a span of time. Say, for example, the doctor says that this person is going to live for 1 year. This ruling is specifically saying that at the end point, where for Ayat al-Thani says the last 2 or 3 months is the bare minimum. They say yes, the last 2 or 3 months is where this issue is going to come. Between 3 and 6 months before his death, there is kind of a gray area, and so there you'd have to do ihtiyat by then getting the permission from the heirs as well. So we're talking specifically about the last 2 or 3 months where he's now seeing death in front of him. In that case, the situation is that he can, any kind of spending that he's doing from his wealth, which is going to make a loss for the heirs, so which basically means, for example, he is, let's say, giving like donations to people, or for example, he is giving one of the relatives something that because of that now others will get less. That's where this issue comes, that he can only exercise 1/3 of his total estate per Ayatollah Sistani. So practically speaking, for example, if at the time of his death, okay, his estate is, for example, let's say, for example, 60 million, and he had already spent in this last 2 or 3 months giving away to sadaqah or giving to people, he had spent, for example, 30 million. So we'll say this 60 plus 30, that means his final estate is in reality 90 million, out of which he had authority over only 30 million. So in these last 2-3 months, if he gave someone worth 30 million maximum, then he's okay. More than that, his action was invalid, and so you would need permission from the heirs. So for example, he said, okay, I'm seeing death now, and for example, okay, my daughter is going to get less for my inheritance. In his mind, he thinks, okay, I'm alive, so let me give her right now. Which is what Ayatollah Khoui was saying. Ayatollah Khoui said, okay, you're alive, even though you know you're dying in 2 months, it's fine. It's like any other normal person, you do whatever you want. So here, if he does that, if it's up to that, for example, 30 million, that is fine. So the question was, is Agha Khoui fatwa only used for terminal illness or in any case? Can we follow Agha Khoui fatwa if I'm a follower of Ayatollah Thani? So like I said, first of all, this is not a case of ihtiyat wajib. You cannot do ruju, and even if you could do ruju, you couldn't do to Ayatollah Khoui unless you had done ruju to him when he was alive. So Agha Khoui's fatwa is, there's nothing special over here. He's just saying that, look, as long as you are alive, you can do anything you want with your wealth. Even if it's 1 day before your death, he was saying that, okay, there's no special ruling for you. So you can do whatever you want. The next one is, if we have a house in a joint name and my husband says in his will before he dies that when he dies the house is fully mine as a gift, do I inherit his house fully? Same with joint account where partially I have contributed but his will read that it's a gift to me. Do I inherit that too? The same principle applies that if it was within his 1/3 of his estate, then he was rightfully gifting to you. So like I said that, okay, for example, if he has, let's say, many properties, he can from his 1/3 say, okay, this whole apartment I'm giving to my wife. As long as it's within the 1/3, you are fine. The thing about joint accounts is that sometimes people open joint accounts just for the sake of convenience. It doesn't mean that if I open a joint account for the sake of convenience, now automatically the money is 50-50. No, that doesn't mean. No, that's just for convenience, we open a joint account. But after that, there should be an understanding between the husband and wife that, okay, this money that's here, let's say if I'm one putting all the amount of money, am I making you a partner and saying, okay, it's 50-50, 60-40, 70-30? If I'm not, then just because I opened a joint account doesn't make automatically 50-50. So in this case, if there's a joint account, and the question says that she's also contributing something. So if she's contributing something, the amount that's there from what she contributed, that's anyways hers. When he dies, the remaining will be seen that was his. In his will, if he said, okay, all of this goes to my wife, if it accounted to 1/3 of his total estate, then okay, yeah, she can get that. If no, for example, it did not count as 1/3 of the estate, it was much more. Then she will only get that 1/3 part, and the rest she has to get the permission of the other heirs. Can I make a will saying I want my asset equally divided between my 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter? Is it valid? No, if what you mean by that is that everything that I have is going to be distributed equally, primarily speaking, no, that's not the case. You only have control over 1/3. That you can say, yes, from this 1/3, I want all my children to get equal. Or if I know that from the 2/3, the son is going to get more than the daughter, then from this 1/3, I can top up what the daughter is going to get so that at the end of the day, they receive somewhat equal amount. After I have given my kids their share of gold and I tell them the remaining is for my namaz and rozas verbally, or even if I put in my will, does it work or do I need their consent? So I'm assuming what is meant over here is that the person, when they're alive, they give their gold to their children. Okay, now that you've given them, now you no longer own it. So it's not going to be part of your estate. When you die, whatever you have left, you left, for example, 2 rings for yourself. Okay, that's your estate. So you only have 1/3 over that anyways. But this thing of like, okay, I give them and tell them the rest is only for my namaz and rozas, no, because that's a normal inheritance case where, okay, only you have 1/3 at the end of the day. Unless verbally, yes, you, for example, you get their consent that, look, technically these 2 rings I've kept for myself, I only own 1/3 of these 2 rings. So if you give me permission, then I am bequeathing the whole of it, for example, to be used for my namaz and rozas. And if they are baligh, then they can give that permission. So those were the questions that I received. If there are any other questions, one thing I should mention though as well is that another mustahab part of the will, or highly recommended, is to give some recommendations apart from the wealth to the people after you. So you've discussed how to distribute and what to do, but giving specific advice is also highly recommended in a will. So in Nahj al-Balagha, you've seen Imam Ali has a will for Imam Hassan and Hussein and for everyone else who reaches the will. So the benefit of this is that there are cases where when people are alive, they tell their children, do this, do that, for example, make sure you pray Fajr, go for namaz al-Shab, go to the mosque, and they don't listen one thing. But if they see it in a will, then they have that kind of like emotional, okay, my dad, for example, when he was passing away, the last thing he told me was, make sure you go to mosque for Jamaat namaz. That can have a real strong impact on the person. And so it's highly recommended that, okay, in your will, you also put an advice section. That I advise my children, for example, pray namaz on time, do your wajibat, don't fight after me. Emotionally, that has a strong impact on the children to follow that as well. And with regards to the case of arbitration and, for example, appointing someone to solve the dispute, I would be cautious in the sense that make sure that whoever you are telling to do that should know the Shari rulings as well. And it's not the case that through this process they are now eating someone else's right. So it's always good to make sure that if you are preparing for this, make sure you pick someone who is able to understand the Shari aspect correctly. There was one question, I think Sabir Auntie, about the father passing away with a young child. So there is that discussion in fiqh on the chapter of Hadana, or who gets to keep the child. There's a lot of details there, but briefly speaking, in this case where the father dies, the haqq of Hadana goes straight to the mother alone, so not the in-laws. And vice versa. If the mother dies for a non-baligh child, then the haqq of Hadana is strictly only for the father. If both of them die, then it goes to the paternal grandfather. If he was also not there, then if he had appointed someone, then that person will have the right. And if he had not appointed someone, then from the relatives, they must get permission from the Hakim Ashar to appoint someone and come to a conclusion together of who will be in charge of this non-baligh child. If there are any other questions from the floor. I think we have like 5 minutes.
I'm not still clear about this, the ruling of Agha Sistani and Agha Khui. Now, for example, I tell you that, you know, that Habib, I'm giving you my car, but I'm driving it now until my death, but it is your car. With your permission, I'm driving this car.
Okay.
Right? So will it become from my 1/3 estate?
No, so now I'm the owner of your car.
You are the owner.
Yeah. And I'm giving you permission to drive. And that means tomorrow if we fight, I can take that permission back.
You can take the car.
Yeah.
Because it's your car now.
Yeah, it's my car. Yeah.
So
you've gifted it to me, and I'm saying for now you can use it.
Yes.
So that's no longer inheritance or will anything. That's only mine. And okay, I've given you permission until you're alive. You can drive the car. That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So that clears the Agha Khui's and Agha Sistani's rulings.
No, Agha Khui was saying that. See, the general principle is in fiqh is an-nas musallatuna ala amwalihim. People have full authority over their wealth. Today I have my wealth, I can decide to do whatever I want with it in halal. I want to give you everything, I want to give some orphan. As long as I'm alive, that's the general principle. I can do whatever I want with my wealth. It's only at death that, okay, I can only have 1/3 that I can do over my wealth. The issue with a terminally ill person is, Ayatollah Khoui was saying, even for a terminally ill person, there is no special ruling. He has full authority over his wealth, he can do whatever he wants with his wealth. What Ayatollah Thani and most of the other Maraji are saying is that no. When you're fine and normal, yes, this principle applies. You can do whatever you want with your wealth. But for a terminally ill person, at the end, the last 2 or 3 months, there, he cannot do everything he wants. He's only limited by this 1/3. He only has access to 1/3 of his wealth if he wants to give away to other people. Only terminally ill, yes. Okay. Question, yes. Yeah.
So let's say the car belongs to you.
Yeah.
So is it given officially documented, or is just spoken it verbally? So if it has been documented, it's something a different story scenario.
Yeah.
Then you can take it back when there's a dispute among the two of you. But if it's not been documented, what happens?
So legally, I don't know what happened, documented, but one of the conditions for an Islamic gift to apply is shart of qabd. Qabd means I have to take possession over it. So for example, if he just tells me verbally, I'm giving you the car, no, verbally doesn't work. He has to, for example, let's say, give me the keys or give me the paper, for example, such that I say, yes, I have taken over the car, I have possession of the car, and now, for example, I give it back and say, yes, okay, you're allowed to drive however long you want. And now that because it's mine, I can take it back tomorrow. Or if I die, my heirs can say, okay, no, why is his car with him? No, it's coming to us.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other question before we can close? There's a question.
On the same note of my question,
yeah.
Say the girl was married in Mombasa. And she was from Tanzania, and she came to Kenya. Yeah? And once that child, of course, is a Nabalik child, the husband passes away. Now the whole house is furnished, everything. And she cannot do anything about it because she is just a stranger there. So at that moment, like, if she's leaving the house just like that and going away, and she feels, okay, the community will take it up, or the Jamaat can take it up, and she leaves it everything on there. So who takes the decision of like paying for the rent or removing all the things from that house and like?
So you mean like it's because it belongs to the husband, it was his estate?
Yes.
So if he had a will, then he's already discussed in his will that, for example, who's going to be the executor and what's going to happen to my house.
But no will. Then
and if there's no will, then that whole house now is going to be part of his estate and divided in a Shari way. So she has 1/8 of the house, for example. Depending now, let's say if parents are there, let's say it could be 1/6. If kids are, if there's no, the child also has a right. So each has their own specific share of the house that they get. The wife only gets the value of the house, though. Yes.
No, like the house she was rented.
Oh, so the house, no one owns the house then. Okay, fine. So in that case, how are they staying there? No one's paying the rent. So that is not part of the estate because he didn't own the house. I'm saying from the things that he owned, whatever the proportions are, they will get and it'll be distributed. If you're saying there is no executor, the Hakim Ashar can appoint someone and say, okay, for this case, help them distribute the Shari way.
See, this mother was told, okay, fine, you have to keep all the husband's clothes and everything by the time till the child becomes Bali. So now the child is only about maybe 6 months or 12 months or whatever.
Yeah.
How is the wife going to keep all these clothes till the, and what does happen like
so that? That's interesting. In Irth, there's something called Habwa. Habwa means 4 things that belongs to the eldest son when a man dies. His Quran, his ring, his sword, which is not so relevant, and then all his clothes. So all his clothes will belong to the eldest son upon his death. And so with this child now, basically, so this child is now the owner of all his dad's clothes. Now, as a non-baligh child, it cannot be that somebody comes and says, okay, he's not going to wear his dad's clothes, let's all give it to sadaqah. No, you can't do that. So in this case, his Wali Shari. So the Wali Shari over here, his dad is passed away, so it will be his grandfather, paternal grandfather. His paternal grandfather can buy off those clothes from her, the marhum's clothes, and says, okay, in replace of that, I'm putting money for the child, okay, put it in some bank account, for example. When he becomes baligh, he'll take that money. Now that I've bought the clothes, okay, I can give it as sadaqah, for example, if the grandfather is alive. If the grandfather is not alive, then again you have to refer to the Hakim Ashar to assign wali for this child who is non-baligh. But she can't take those clothes and give it away. That's harming the child.
Mother can't.
No. If they decide to keep the clothes for the child, okay, that's fine. But to give it away, no, that she cannot do. Okay, I think we'll close it over here. Please write a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا حسين الشهيد، السلام عليك يا زين العابدين، السلام عليك يا محمد الباكر، السلام عليك يا جعفر الصادق، السلام عليك يا موسى القاضم، السلام عليك يا علي الرضا، السلام عليك يا فاطمة المعصوم القوم، السلام عليك يا محمد التقي، السلام عليك يا علي هادي النكي، السلام عليك يا حسن العسكري، السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهور رحمة الله وبركاته. الله